The following program may contain coarse language, suggestive dialogue, and discussion of violent imagery and sexual situations. It is intended for mature listeners who can tell the difference between facts and opinions.
Televised revolution as we drift through outer space aboard the absolution. With time back and active duty as captain in charge of bringing superior anime action. Yeah, you came to the right place if you have a taste for animation and deep space base. Broadcast through your television due to the
And we are live.
Welcome, listeners, to the first ever Toonami Fan Community Summit. Sounds a little lofty, I know, but hey, whatever. We are here to represent the Toonami fan community as best we can with members from Toonami Faithful, Toonami Escape Podcast, and Toonami Squad. And with that, allow me to introduce our panelists. First up, we have C. Kohler from the Toonami Escape Podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Next up, we have Happy Kuro Kitty from Toonami Faithful.
Hey, Sketch. Happy to be here. Hope we got a lot of listeners tonight.
Me too, Kuro. Next, we have Mr. Paul Pascrillo from Toonami Faithful.
I am here.
You're always missing your entrance. And we have JP Reckless.
Yo, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. JP kind of inspired this by suggesting we do a live show, and I rolled with it.
Yes.
Next up, we have Sam 2 from Toonami Squad.
Hey, happy to be here. So glad to be on. Thank you for having me, Sketch.
Thanks for being here, Sam 2. And you might be wondering, why is he Sam 2? Because here comes Sam 1, also from Toonami Squad.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, Sam. Love hearing from you. And representing both Toonami Escape Podcast and the long gone Toonami Show Rundown / Toonami Showdown, we have Chug.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad you could all make it here. Well, it's certainly a time to be a Toonami faithful, to be a Toonami fan of any kind. We've hit possibly an all-time lull in activity, and it's leaving us all kind of confused, baffled, whatever adjective you want to use. So we are gathering representatives of the active Toonami fan communities because Toonami has reached this point, and we aren't able to get the answers directly from Toonami, but maybe if we put our heads together, we can at least have a productive conversation. So we have some talking points, and if we manage to have some time afterwards, we'll take some questions from the chat, but no promises. So, kicking things off, the first question on our minds: why do we suppose Toonami has reached an all-time low in activity this year? What are your thoughts, C. Kohler?
Well, let me pose the question back to you really quickly, Sketch, just to make sure I'm on the same page. When you say low activity, are you talking about fan activity or are you talking about block viewership?
Mainly block.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's clearly been an ongoing issue ever since COVID, probably a little bit before that, with the block basically having trouble getting sort of the funding it needs or getting the money it needs. I think from my perspective that, and I think some of this has been backed up by what DeMarco had said in the past prior to him sort of taking a vacation from social media, that, you know, it's not easy for them in the market right now to get new shows like they could back in, 2013 or 2016. It's just not easy for them to get that. And so we've been riding a bit on fumes for a little while now. And then there was also the shift, and maybe a smart one on their part, or at least it seemed so at the time, for them to really try to go out and make their own creative works so they could wholly own those and garner viewership and get people's eyeballs on Toonami where they could premiere things for the first. And unfortunately, a lot of their originals haven't really been that great. I mean, there have been a few. I love Space Dandy. I actually think Ninja Kamui was all right for the most part, but there's been some duds. And when you're putting a lot of your money into those things, you're not having as much to spend on getting those anime staples, those high action shows that really started out the revival block. And we're not even getting things right now like really common things like My Hero Academia. And there's a new season of Dr. Stone that could be on the block right now. And I kind of think maybe it has something to do with their inability, both from a tightening of budgets, but also competition with streaming that's making it hard for them to really get shows that are going to get people to tune in. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I'd have to say I agree with all your points. What are your thoughts, Kuro?
Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out how to unmute my mic. I don't know about all-time low because my memory is a little fuzzy about what it was like before Toonami went off the air. That feels like ages ago. I do think that the block activity it does demonstrate a certain amount of lack of interest, not certain, but a lot of lack of interest. It is definitely a low compared to, a couple years ago, even 5 years ago when I first started with the podcast, and over my first years with the podcast where we had a really banging, we had a really solid block with at least 2 premieres, one original series per year, it felt like. We had some top line stuff like MHA, and then we had some things that nobody thought that we would watch, like Parasite. So it definitely is demonstrating there's a lack of interest here in some capacity. We can obviously only speculate what it is, but it's not a great block. It just isn't. Everything that's currently airing is recycled. Everything. I mean, Common Side Effects is coming up, and even that is recycled from Adult Swim. So there's absolutely nothing airing that's original, and there's nothing that is close to fresh. So I would say that's a pretty big low. And with no communication, it's hard to not feel frustrated and upset about what is happening. This isn't a good block. It definitely... Yeah, it's not a great block. And I haven't heard any of the podcasts that all of the people here who on have said this is a great block. I haven't actually seen anyone post. I've seen people say, I'm okay with this. This isn't that bad. But not confirming the negative doesn't make it a good thing. That's not a resounding endorsement of a positive experience. It's like, I can live with this, but we don't want to live with it. We want to be engaged. We want to enjoy it. This is our Saturday night. We're tuning in on our Saturday night. I mean, regardless of what you might think our social life isn't, we're here out of choice that we could be doing other things. So the onus isn't on us to make it interesting or tell you, you have the budget to look at what the market is is saying is popular. You can see on social media what's popular. You can see what people have responded to in the past. You can see overall in the history what has gotten big numbers, big viewing numbers, positive response online. Like, there's definitely ways to make this better and not just be lazy and recycle old material. So it's low. It's not great.
Yes, it is frustrating. To clarify, I was speaking of the Adult Swim era, but for real, we're reaching 2008 Toonami levels of inactivity, and that is troubling, if not for the fact that we know that they are making things for the block. So, Mr. Paul Pascrillo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually did the mic thing correctly this time. Um,
We're learning.
we're learning. We're learning as we
It's a
go.
learning progress.
It's a very learning. Yes. So I'm assuming some people have heard our podcast, so you've kind of gotten basically an idea of what my thoughts are on this. But what we haven't mentioned so far that Curl hasn't mentioned, and what I think we're missing here is Crunchyroll is a major issue, and they seem to be the basically the block that literally blocks Toonami from getting anything, even things that Toonami should have had on the block now that they don't because of this monopoly that Sony has. And quite frankly, I don't think, at least from the experience that I've had, I don't feel like they're not trying. And I think it's definitely a good sign that we still have originals coming to the block, and that's always a good thing. I mean, obviously, Lazarus. There's a report out there that Cartoon Network, which I'm assuming they mean Adult Swim as well, is part of Fire Force season 3. So
it's not super verifiable yet, but here's hoping.
Here's hoping. So it looks like we have things coming, and what we've been trying to say here is either A, they're getting blocked, and something may have been taken from underneath them, so to speak, which is why this January and February, and now we're going into March tomorrow, is the way it looks. Or their budget hasn't reset until hopefully tomorrow. And with what we saw with the schedule post today, hopefully with DBZ Kai leaving, maybe, just maybe, there's something coming in March before Lazarus comes. I mean, I can only be hopeful at this point, but at least we know that something's coming in April. So I guess there's a lot of questions still. Do I think Toonami's going anywhere? No. I mean, there's way too many signs that Toonami is still going to be around at least to the end of the year. So I don't think anybody needs to worry about that. But as far as, the low activity, there's got to be something going on that we don't know about. And I hate to say it, but while it's a good thing for Jason that he needed to take this break, and that's great, it's kind of bad for us because we don't have that communication point anymore. And it kind of feels like that's lacking, and that's what's really causing all of us to come together and have this conversation.
Man, if I were him, I wouldn't want to be fielding these questions either.
No, probably not. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
All right, thank you, Paul. And JP, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, to bounce off what Paul said, it definitely is Crunchyroll. Crunchyroll has been blocking whatever Toonami is trying to get. But in my opinion, I feel like are they in a worse position than they were back in 2008 when CN after the cancellation? To me personally, I don't think so. We haven't reached that low yet because, as Paul said, we still have a lot of plans. We still got Lazarus coming. We got the Rooster Fighter anime coming. So there's a sign that Adult Swim wants to take care of Toonami, unlike Cartoon Network back in 2008. So I don't think so. I don't think Toonami is going to get canceled or Toonami is going to suffer for long. But as Paul said, there's a lack of communication. Jason left social media. There's no been reassurance that everything is going to be okay, that we are locked. Just stay with us. I know it's hard, but stay with us, and we're gonna get this block popping. We haven't had no reassurance yet, so we're only assuming the worst because we haven't had that communication. I personally believe that Toonami can turn things around. Whether that's working with another anime distributor or probably making more originals. We'll see. We'll see where this year goes. By the time we get to summer, it's going to be very telling, in my opinion. But for right now, I think there just needs to be communication better communication from their part to make sure that we are good. Make sure that everybody can at least be at ease. And as long as they do that, it's like I think we can, at least for the time being, we can calm down and just have trust that they can get this working again.
What about you, Sam? Too.
Okay, so like I kind of feel like it's like partially to blame Crunchyroll, but like also like kind of putting the blame on Toonami themselves, because I understand that Crunchyroll is just out here blocking everything for Toonami. I understand that part, but it's like on the other side. I mean, like back then they were more creative with the low budget that they had. Like I think back to like 2020 when like COVID was at its height. I mean, they were still doing some unique stuff. Um but it's like I don't know, it's just like cuz I have low expectations when it comes to these schedule updates, but it's like when they did that schedule update of like Fully Cooley Grunge, Double Blue Exorcist and the rest, and I was just like what? Because I'm mostly either positive or I try to, like understand where they're going with these schedule updates. But when I saw that update, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And I don't know. I just feel like there are like so many better options that they could do. If they're limited on stuff. I mean, yeah, and honestly, yeah, because I've said this before too, but yeah, like the lack of communication really does hurt. I always think back to this one moment. Well, two things. Well, I think about Pre-Flight. I used to watch Pre-Flight a lot when they were putting out those streams on Fridays. Those were always like I loved those, and those were always great because you always had a bunch of behind the scenes info at the time. And the other thing is that I recently, because they make this schedule update, and then it's like they keep damage controlling. Let's put common side effects. Now let's take off DBZ Kai and put One Piece on, and it's like I remember a while back, that this was 2018, I want to say, when they were experimenting with 9 p.m. start time. I remember they did a schedule update. I don't remember exactly, but I remember they did a schedule update and no one liked it. The only thing I remember about it was they ended it with JoJo. Like they put JoJo at the very end of the block. And I just remember everyone got so mad about that. And I remember like a few days later, they actually were like, okay, we understand we understand y'all are not fans of this schedule, so here's a revamped schedule, which a lot of people were more happier about, but I wasn't that happy because they put Hunter x Hunter at the end. But I think back to that, And that is such a stark, stark difference from today. Massive difference from today, where like, and I'm just, like, I understand it's like, Crunchyroll can get in the way, but on the other hand, I'm just like, there are other options besides Crunchyroll, and even if you guys don't have even if you guys don't really have a budget, I mean, like, there are better there are better ways to tackle this, and I'm just like scratching my head because I like, what's the decision making here? Like, I get that's really all I gotta say is like, it's partly on Crunchyroll, but at the same time, I also feel like it's partly on Toonami themselves for not being clear and for not, handling a situation like this better when I feel like they did a better job back in like 2020. But yeah, that's what I got to say about it.
Yeah, they stopped doing those live streams on Adult Swim because there was a bunch of AT&T budget cuts, that affected a lot of things. I guess I'm up, and my thoughts on this whole situation. It's just such an interesting contrast between the start of this year versus the start of last year when we had lots of stuff going on, all things considered. But I guess giving them reasonable doubt, it's very difficult to obtain licenses. There probably has been budget cuts. But as much as we might bemoan Crunchyroll being the problem, there's other options, and I just don't think they're really taking advantage of that. And maybe they're saving their money for this or the other thing, but what good does it do if you save all your money for this popular thing that you can get after its popularity has kind of gone by the wayside, and in the meantime you leave your audience starving for a quarter of the year? What How can you expect people to stick around if you have nothing to show them? It's absolutely baffling to me. The one thing that I cannot stress enough is I totally believe that there are people at Adult Swim that care about Toonami, that they care about what Toonami has going on. But unfortunately, I feel like their hands are tied. They can't do the kinds of things that they were doing years prior. All of the things that make the block just kind of continue to diminish bit by bit. And it's sad to see, but it's not surprising because to a business, all these flourishes are not that important. They make or break the experience for some people. But above all else, the biggest problem is you just don't have any new shows for your audience. And you can't expect them to stick around for these reused shows. And though I will give them credit for some level of creativity, what with throwing common side effects on, that's definitely a 2020 kind of move. And it's a good show. But after already having basically 3 months of nothing but Mashal and One Piece to look forward to, unless you were rewatching Blue Exorcist. Yeah, that's very frustrating. And on top of that, we were concerned about DBZ playing again, but it looks like they're not doing that. So that is good. It's still not any premieres before 1:30 because One Piece is at 1:30 and 2, but I kind of get why they're not moving it. There's really no reason to move it. And I don't know, I'm just happy that they're not replaying Kai again. And I also think it's good that they didn't suddenly run out and get the rest of Kai because they realized they didn't have the rest. Because when they have such a situation going on with the block, the last thing I want them to do is just go back and get more Kai in a hurry and spend money on that. That would drive me bonkers. Totally a safe move, I suppose. But I'm glad that they're not resorting to that. We're getting double One Piece for a time. and they're just gonna keep trying to fill the schedule however they can until they can spend money on shows. But I really gotta ask, why can't they spend money on shows yet? What is the difference? Why is this happening? And I have some theories about that. Like maybe Rewind really didn't meet expectations and now they're paying for it retroactively. But like, it's night and day compared to the activity of early last year. How is it so different? Why has that happened? I wish I had the answer. I wish we had the answer. But I think we can all agree Toonami's gonna stick around. We're gonna get a Lazarus. We're gonna get Rooster Fighter. We're gonna get other shows. But man, I don't know how they expect their audience to stick around when there is nothing, nothing for them to be excited about, unless you like One Piece, like me. And with that, I give it over to Sam One.
It's interesting talking about Toonami in this year because the schedule from the very beginning of this year has been pretty bleak. I do kind of wonder if something fell through at the last minute for January. But considering now that it's February and they still don't have anything to show, it really does feel like there has been a big cutback in terms of their budget for this year. And whether or not like they get a restart in March, I don't know if that's the case or not. I have no clue. I kind of also wonder if the network had higher expectations for some of their originals, and some of those were probably extremely expensive, considering one of them took pretty much 5 years to come out. So it makes me wonder, like, did some of those shows underperform? Were they not happy with how the block performed last year, so they had to make budget cuts for that reason particularly? I don't know. It's all speculation on my end. I am just a viewer in the end of it, and as a viewer, I think this lineup sucks. It's just objectively, it's a terrible lineup. I'm very glad that I do think with something like adding like common side effects, that does feel like they listened to their community for a second and like, okay, hold on. We're still doing the double Blue Exorcist for 1 week, but the next week we're actually just going to air something different. Here you go. Here is common side effects. It's not technically a new show because we're already airing it, but we're encoring it on our block. I think the Toonami audience will like that show. It's a very good show. But it's just, if you are a viewer of the block, you watch this every Saturday night, you choose to watch this every Saturday night, they need to give you more reasons to tune in. And Lazarus has so much mounted on it right now, because people want a really good original, and it is up to Lazarus to deliver that good original. And with it being the brand new show, the first brand new show of this year, it kind of weighs on that so much more, rather than it being like, oh, it's a show that's coming out alongside all these other cool things that are running. Like, that's my piece on it for this year. I don't know how it got this bad or why it got this bad. At this point, it is what it is.
Yes. Very frustrating. And yes, Lazarus has a lot riding on it, and it's frankly just bad planning to roll that out with nothing to really hype up. Like, cool. If they put it next to common side effects thematically, I get it. But for your audience, don't you want something else to incentivize them to even check out Lazarus? It just doesn't make sense to me. And finally, let's hear your thoughts, Chug.
I'll try not to go too long here, but yeah. So we've talked about Sony already, but I think it can't be understated that there are other companies also kind of muscling in on the game at this point. Disney is getting a lot more shows than they were before. Netflix has been a little bit more aggressive recently. So you have multiple avenues kind of drying up here, and with Sony not really seeming like they want to play ball as much, and also with the absorption of Funimation, that's like 2 avenues that they had for getting shows are just kind of dried up now. So Yeah, I don't blame them for going in with originals as much as they have. We might be having a very different conversation right now if some of those had been better received. I think the block changes recently, common side effects being added instead of Blue Exorcist isn't exactly the most bold choice. I kind of think it would be a different conversation right now if that was premiering on the block instead, but it's a rerun from Adult Swim from 5 weeks ago. I think that show was great. I'm hoping the Toonami audiences receives that well. And also with One Piece taking the place of the Dragon Ball Z Kai reruns, I think that shows that they are listening to the reception of this.
Well, maybe. I just kind of think they realized they couldn't play DBZ Kai again.
Yeah, I mean, they could have. Yeah, I don't really know what the license is like on that, if it was going to start over at episode 1 or not, but it does make it seem like maybe they had realized, like, oh, people are upset. But I see them making changes. It does feel like they are listening to viewer reception here. I just don't know what all they can do at this point, which, again, that's kind of just out of my knowledge at that point. I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I will say, if this happened to like 3-4 years ago, the fact that we don't know if Blue Exorcist is going to go into season 2 is wild. Like, I feel like that would have just been like tweeted out at this point if it was like in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about all I got here.
Look, if they were listening, they'd play IGPX Season 2.
They should.
And not pull off the Invincible Fight Girl in the middle of a two-parter. What are you doing? What are you doing? Well. Okay. First talking point down. Several more to go. Now, here's a thought. Does WBD still value Toonami? And are they de-emphasizing it? Do we think they're de-emphasizing it based on what we are seeing this year? What are your thoughts, Kuro?
You know, I think it really depends on what one's definition of value is. I mean, the way the current block is, they're making money off of it because they make their money through ad content, and they haven't paid extra for any of these shows since they're all recycled things that they already had access to. So as far as monetary value, they're doing quite well. And I also look at this and think, well, it's still a long block. It's 3 hours long. So they haven't been cutting it short, which has happened on and off even since the comeback. I think in terms of value, I would say rather it's undervalued and underestimated. I think that if they're looking purely at profit margin and not at customer loyalty and the value they're getting from viewership, then yeah, that's pretty low, because first of all, the lack of communication just screams volumes about that. We went from having multiple forms, you know, not just in social media, but from pre-flight to absolutely nothing. I mean, and the fact that they're still using Facebook as the way to announce their news just blows my mind. I talk about outdated when they have access to the fans directly. We're the viewers right here. The people here have direct access to the viewers. We frequently provide content that talks to the viewers. We frequently provide news. We're all listed on their fucking website, for God's sakes. Excuse me for cursing. That was never told to me. That wasn't a rule, but it's going to happen anyway. So
it's not a rule.
It's a little baffling to me. Like, what are they quantifying as value? It strikes me more as a fundamental misunderstanding And that has to be close to the leadership level. Because again, we don't know if this is a budget issue. We don't know if this is simply someone doesn't care, though that is my prevailing theory, that there's somebody in charge that doesn't care and isn't invested. Not saying that the whole team is this way, but I'm convinced that there is someone at leadership level that is not interested in investing time and energy to find creative workarounds to making a really engaging block, which includes all the extras, which includes the pre-flight, which includes the little bits that Tom has, the little commercials. You know, we have the game review still, the events, even the music videos, etc. I think de-emphasizing, I think it's become more of a extra that it's just like, oh, this is the thing we kind of do on Saturday. Let's just, put what we have, and every now and then a bone, which would be an original, or once in a while we'll get something new. So I would say undervalued and underestimated would be my understanding, due primarily to a lack of communication. I mean, I can only speculate about the other reasons, but definitely a lack of communication, which has honestly been such a staple in how things have gone the past decade. So yeah, that's my thought.
And what are your thoughts, Mr. Pascrillo?
So we've been doing this for a long time, as Sketch knows. So
Almost 13 years, buddy.
oh my God, why are we still here? So I don't think that they're doing anything different, so to speak. I think that they are doing the exact same thing that we have seen from them before, because Toonami, yeah, sometimes they get advertising, sometimes they don't. Once an original like Lazarus comes out, they'll get, promotion, and then that's it. So, I don't think they're de-emphasizing it. I think everything's the same, but the question, like you've posed, is, are they punishing Toonami because of Rewind? That might be the only change here. But other than that, I don't think anything else has changed. Well, and obviously, like, we don't have some kind of premiere in these first few months. So that's the only difference. And I think what we lose focus on, a lot of people lose focus on, I should say, in the community, is Toonami doesn't have a huge budget to begin with. So if it doesn't have a huge budget, it's not costing them a lot of money, and they're still making money revenue wise off of Toonami, so to speak, then it's really still doing its job. And that's why you're not going to see it go anywhere. And again, we also have to keep in mind too that every original has its own budget. That doesn't seem to be going anywhere, doesn't seem to be changing as far as we know. We'll find out if that's the case. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of sum this up really quick, I don't really see any difference other than, again, no premiere in the first few months, and, possibly being punished because of Rewind. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's much the same, honestly. The complicated relationship of Adult Swim under Warner, under other management, has always made for things to be more complicated than you would think they would be. But I'll elaborate that later. JP, what are your thoughts?
Well, let's see. I don't think they're de-emphasizing it. I never. Pretty much what Paul said is. I haven't noticed any difference. Um, I don't think they're. Sorry. I think they still do value Toonami because we've seen promotion of Toonami outside of Adult Swim. I think before
True.
I watched Dynamite, AEW Dynamite on Max. Before that, they promoted Toonami on Dynamite, on Collision. So there is some sort of support, some sort of value for Toonami, but in WBD's part. My question is where is it enough? The
Mhm.
Could Warner Bros. Discovery give them enough to keep the block going? Because it's one thing to promote the block, but if you don't have the shows or the lineup that can keep viewers going, then what's the point? So, and I kind of compare Toonami's drought to AEW's drought right now, where they're in the cold period. As long and from the wrestling standpoint, Tony Khan is like, there's no need to change. There's no need to change our product because as long as we're in the top spots on Wednesdays, the top 3, top 20 spots, we don't have to change. We're doing just fine. And I feel like that's Tanami's way. As the people who's running the network, they feel like, hey, as long as Tanami's in the top positions, in the top spots on Saturdays, we don't have to put that much effort into it. I'm not talking about the team or the Toonami crew or any of that. I'm probably just talking about what the executives might be thinking. So I wish they could do more to support Toonami. Probably give them a little bit of more budget so they can acquire more shows, or probably hire another person for the Toonami crew that can help get these deals done. But other than that, I don't see significant changes. I think as long as they still promoting it, it's like there is some value in their eyes, I think.
That's true. As much as we all might roll our eyes at them promoting Fooly Cooley Grunge every week, clearly they want people to notice. And if they didn't care, they wouldn't even do that much.
Exactly.
Sam, too, what are your thoughts?
So, like, I still feel like they care about Toonami to an extent, because they've been all in on not only these original stuff, but also these, other shows we've been getting that were initially for Cartoon Network that they moved to Adult Swim, like Invincible, Fight Girl, My Adventures with Superman. In my opinion, I feel like they look at Toonami as like, ooh, the place to premiere these shows. Like we got this hot new action stuff. When are we gonna put it? Toonami seems like a safe bet because it's Saturday nights, and then because Toonami has an audience, so like people will talk about it and all that. So like I feel like they look at Toonami as like an avenue for all their originals and all their own programming. You know what I mean? Like in that sense, but like yeah, it's like you don't and then at the same time I feel like they don't give them enough budget because it's like it's just like, do you expect them to only show all these original stuff and nothing else? Like and especially when these originals haven't exactly lived up to the hype, with the only exceptions being the Western animated shows that were never really meant for Toonami. They were just kind of pushed on there. Those have really been the only high points, in my opinion, in terms of original content. And I don't know, like one other thing I think back to, if you want to talk about budget, is I remember when they got Dragon Ball Super, and yeah, they put a lot of hype into that, but I remember before Dragon Ball Super premiered, they actually had ad space on YouTube, because I remember I remember watching some YouTube videos and they would play and when the ad played, it would be the Dragon Ball Super trailer. So I'm just like I don't expect, that type of budget to where we can get ad space, but at the same time it's like, please do more aside from putting all your efforts into these originals, which in my opinion, like ever since Uzumaki, I just stopped caring about, in my opinion, because in my opinion, I've lost a lot of faith after that. But yeah, I guess my overall thoughts is that, like, I feel like they still care about Toonami to an extent as a way to premiere originals and, new stuff, not so much, actually giving them the budget to acquire content. That's all I got to say on that.
Yes. The way I see it, Warner Brothers has always kind of underutilized Toonami, or rather underutilized their own products on Toonami. Now they do make, over the years there were Cartoon Network originals, Toonami originals, Adult Swim originals that have ended up on Toonami. And on the very rare occasion there was a DC show, and I'm just kind of scratching my head thinking, why aren't these DC shows part of Toonami in any regular fashion? Why do we have to wait for the crumbs? Not saying My Adventures with Superman was crumbs. That was a great get, and I'm very happy to have it. But why is that the only one? Where's Harley Quinn? I understand they want Max to prioritize these things. They want Max. Fine. Run them on Max first. Get your views on Max. But like, even years later, we still can't have these shows, even when Toonami has nothing to air. Why? Sure, they're definitely still supporting Toonami in various ways. They're still producing more original series. They may or may not have cut the budget to the point that it's really hard for them to get any shows right now, which would be unfortunate. It's just kind of a baffling thing, because they're still promoting Toonami. They're still making shows for Toonami. They still expect people to watch Toonami, but they won't give them the money that they need to have a reasonable amount of activity. Like, we're not asking for so many premieres. We're not asking for 2019 here. We're not asking for 2018 here. No. But come on, we can't just have 1, 2, maybe 3. It's that is ASA levels, and that is not gonna cut it. So I really think there's just not enough support, whether or not they still support it. As for de-emphasizing, maybe a little bit. There are anime that they are producing that they are not putting on Toonami, and you think, of all things, if it's anime, put it on Toonami. And yet we did not get the Suicide Squad Isekai. That went to Hulu along with Max. And even months later, still not on Toonami. Again, at a time when they could really use something fresh. It's baffling. There's definitely things that they could be doing, and they're just choosing not to. And to me, that means they don't value Toonami enough. Now, I am a big Toonami fan, have been for many, many years. So I have a different perspective on these things than your usual businessman might. But you have this brand that has been working for so many years in the US and internationally, and you decide that you're not going to put your action shows, your DC shows on here, like, ever? Why? Doesn't make sense to me. Make it make sense, Warner Brothers. Make it make sense. They could definitely be doing more. And when we're at the point where we have just One Piece for network premieres, that is like, if this isn't the time when you show up with something from the DC library just to tide us over, when are you ever gonna do it? Maybe never. And why that is, uh, I don't know. It's frustrating. But I'm sure Sam One has some other thoughts.
Whether or not Warner Brothers Discovery cares about Toonami, I don't think really matters all too much, because Warner Brothers as a corporation has always never really cared about the brands that they owned. Does Adult Swim still care about Toonami? Yes, of course. They still value that brand. It is their only real forward-facing brand, right? Because Warner Brothers as a corporation isn't really a forward-facing corporation at all. They're very much run by a lot of suits. And Toonami is like that one youth point for them that gets more youth to watch them. But for right now, it does seem like Adult Swim, whether or not their hands are tied, or that altogether that Warner Brothers ineptitude, which shines through with anything that they do, it has been kind of affecting them. But I also tend to think that they're still going to be around, but Toonami being de-emphasized, I do think that they are de-emphasized to some way, because I don't really think that they are a priority to the network anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that Adult Swim doesn't care about Toonami. They still want it around. It is a forward-facing brand for them. It is a brand that talks directly to the customer, to the viewer. But in terms of just like, you kind of saw the seeds of that last year, because last year during their San Diego Comic-Con, there was no Toonami on the Green panel. I expect that to be a reoccurring pattern for this year. There's not going to be a Toonami on the Green. If anything, there might be a Rooster Fighter panel where they announce the date and everything, and then they also announce, hey, here's also this cool little thing that's coming to our block. And that's it. That's them putting less emphasis and priority on Toonami than they have comparatively to years prior.
Yeah, that really spells it out. You see it in all the little details. Though they did out of nowhere have a special little Toonami event in Atlanta just recently to premiere something.
Yeah,
Still not entirely sure what.
It probably was Lazarus, but
Yeah,
I mean,
probably.
like, that's just, if I could just jump in a bit, it's like, that's a very small thing, and also they advertised it way late. That was something that
Yes.
we had to scour for, and we found out just randomly one day. So it's like, well, where is this marketing for your shows, like your block in general? Like, this would have been a cool event if you were a Toonami fan in the Atlanta area. I would not be able to make it because I live in Chicago, so that's way out of my range to go there on a Thursday?
Mhm.
Yeah, Thursday.
Yeah.
And also pay an admission fee to go in there. So yeah, that was always out of the question for me. But if you were in the area or near that area, it would have been nice to get like a heads up in advance. That way you can make plans ahead of time. But instead, no, it's just like, oh yeah, here's a last minute thing that we're doing. It's just like, it's small things like that that really make me think you don't want to prioritize this thing anymore. Which doesn't mean that you want to get rid of it. It just means that you are kind of cutting back a whole lot of your communications, a lot more of like these fun events that Toonami used to host. They used to go to MomoCon every year, and they stopped that. And that's really upsetting. And also, like, with the Toonami on the Green, again, like, I'm not expecting them to come back this year and say, like, yeah, we're doing a Toonami on the Green. It's like, I think 2023 was it. I think they've kind of came to a conclusion of, we're not paying more money to host another event on the Green. We already paid so much for this thing. We're just going to host a little panel inside of one of the many places at San Diego Comic-Con, and then you can make your announcements there. And that's all that they view it as.
Yeah, and I think we can both agree that these original series, well, intended for Toonami, they wouldn't be happening if they couldn't funnel that directly to Max right after.
Yeah, and that's a major point of what Toonami is to Adult Swim. For Toonami to Adult Swim now, it is just a machine that pumps out original content that feeds into another machine. And that's... I don't like that at all. That is not what Toonami is to me. Toonami has always been an experience that you experience with other people, and you get to watch cool shows a part of that. Yeah, sometimes they air crap. That's just impossible. You cannot avoid. But when they do air good shows, those are experiences that you keep with you for the rest of your life.
I think we can all agree on that. So, Chug, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you guys have hit on a lot of what I want to talk about already, but just to kind of go over some of that again. Yeah, I do think the promos outside of the block does show some level of care from Warner, at least like as far as they see value in trying to direct people to watch this show or watch the block. Every time they're promoting a new episode of something, it would air on AEW Dynamite. It was Invincible Fight Girl. It was Toonami Rewind. It was Uzumaki. It was Rick and Morty. So clearly they do see value in that way, but I do agree it is baffling how we are under the same umbrella as DC and have been for a while, and it feels like we almost never get anything in that regard. We get some Batman movies sometimes. We get My Adventures with Superman. We got Harley Quinn for one night. It is wild watching a Suicide Squad anime on Max and seeing Jason DeMarco's name in the opening credits and knowing that show is probably not going to go to Toonami. And
Yep,
I think
doesn't
that
make
goes
sense.
I think that goes even beyond just that. Jujutsu Kaisen was a show that I think Max launched with, and we just never got it on the block, even though that would have been a perfect fit. Batman Caped Crusader got shopped around and ended up at Amazon Prime for some reason. And then you look at stuff like Uzumaki, where like, I don't know if we're ever going to know the full story of exactly what happened there, but I think there is a pretty good guess somewhere that somebody from Adult Swim or Warner looked at the budget that show was asking for once they'd kind of were able to restart production again and said, yeah, I don't know about all that, and cut the budget pretty massively. So in that case, I don't know. I kind of go both ways on this one, but it does feel like they are being undervalued.
Okay. C. Kohler, is there any meat left on the bone?
Great question. I kind of agree with a lot of what you guys were saying earlier. Yeah, I mean, and we've been hearing a little bit of both sides on the do we feel they're being de-emphasized? I'm in the camp that I don't feel there's an active effort to de-emphasize Toonami in any way. I do feel like things are kind of going normal, lower budget, and kind of skimping along would be maybe the euphemism I'd use to describe the current situation. I know our next topic is going to talk about premieres, and I have a lot to say there, but without going into that, I'll just say that this sort of situation we're running into right now with, like, we all know that the end of the year is usually kind of the point where they don't really bring new things to Toonami. There's a lot of marathons that run at the end of the year. They kind of bide their time for the new year. If they were going to premiere a new show, they would usually do it in January or February. And that's what feels so bad about our current situation, is that we didn't get that expected new show in January or February. We really are just sort of left high and dry. Now, I will say, I didn't see Mashal coming, and that's kind of just out of left field. And I kind of see that and I go, well, somebody thought it was important to bring Mashal to Toonami. Okay, well, that says something, I think. I don't know. Is Mashal my first pick for Toonami? Maybe not. I mean, I think it was a good show. I actually hadn't seen it before until it aired, and I kind of liked it for the most part. It's not that AAA thing that you can get from a Crunchyroll, but it's an Aniplex show, is pretty good. I think, and again, we'll get to this when we talk about premieres, but I feel like what we're struggling with right now is they're not doing what they used to do back in 2014 or 2016, when it was common for them to be like, okay, a show is leaving the block. Now let's get something different. And it didn't have to be new, but it had to be different. And we're not getting that right now. What we're getting is, oh, well, we've got this stuff that we already aired. It doesn't cost us money to air it. So let's do that, which feels, again, to me like like they're just stretching out time. Now, they got Lazarus coming. I know you guys talked about this on your podcast, but I mean, I'll cross every finger and toe to think that hopefully once Lazarus comes around, maybe they'll have something else to go with it. Maybe a couple of new shows to go with it. That'd be great. Again, not like new shows they made, but maybe some licensees. I don't have high hopes. I really have super low hopes that'll happen. But if it did, that would be a great opportunity for Toonami to kind of have a revival and get more viewership. But as it is right now, we're just riding on fumes. And, another thing I want to say too about grunge, I know a lot of us cringed when we saw, oh, they're going to start the block off with a grunge rewind. And I agree with that. I'm just like, oh boy, why that? But I will say, if you're Toonami, what they've aired grunge twice before, right? So again, I think that's an opportunity for them to sort of get the most bang for their buck, because they produced it, right? I mean, they paid to have it made. So I kind of see that as them like, hey, we got this in our back pocket. Let's pull this out. They don't probably think the same way we do about the quality of that particular show. And I think Shoegaze is all right. I mean, that's coming. But on the whole, again, I feel like right now we're just sort of in a holding pattern. I hope something big happens. Are they de-emphasizing the block? Do they value it? I think they value it. I don't think they're de-emphasizing it. I think they're just running on fumes right now in order to save money. And that's the only perspective I have.
All fair points. I also really like Shoegaze. It's one of my favorite Fooly Cooly sequels. So I'll be happy that that's back on the block for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks exactly. Okay, yeah, premieres, definitely a sticky point right now for longtime viewers that, maybe we're a little too over-focused on how many premieres are airing, but, we just want something fresh. Doesn't have to be super new, and it never has had to be super new. We're not that concerned about it being the latest, greatest, newest, coolest things. We want those hidden gems too. We just want something that we haven't seen, hasn't been on the network before, or at least hasn't been on the network for a very long time, that we still care about. I think we can all agree on that. But at this point, we're down to one network premiere. We'll be back to 2 network premieres, at least, once Lazarus comes in on April 5th. Yet they're still oddly determined to keep the block 3.5 hours. It's always kind of bothered me. 3.5. I personally think a nice 3 might be better, but I don't want them to get rid of Sailor Moon. I like having Sailor Moon around as long as they can have it. But I pose the question to all of you. What are the minimum number of premieres that we could consider this is acceptable considering everything? And I will also pose the question, should the block maybe slim down? And if it should slim down, how much do you think it should slim down? And we will go to Paul Pascrillo.
Well, so let's see. First question, which will be very quick. I would say, because I was looking at the questions earlier and I'm like, would one premiere be okay? Would that be a problem? And the more that I think about it, I would say at least 2 would be fine, because usually the block, has averaged about, at this point, a 3-hour block. So you don't really in the later hours need to have something premiere, so to speak. I mean, listen, we all remember the 6 hour block that pretty much had what almost everything was a premiere, it seemed like. So you get spoiled like that, and you're like, well, I want every single show, every single half an hour to be a premiere. So, I mean, would that be great if that could happen? Of course it would be. But realistically, I think 2 to 3 would be fine. Two, I think at the minimum would be fine. I would like to see 3, but I would be fine with 2. But as for like length of the block, I mean, I think 3 is perfect for it. You know, I remember when Toonami returned. What was it? I believe it was 3 hours, and then it just
3 hours just to repeat,
and then just repeated. Like I'd be even fine if they went back to that if they wanted to, as long as they had premieres for every single show. But yeah, I think Toonami succeeds at 3 hours. We don't need to change that formula. And honestly, like based on what Toonami actually has, I don't see the problem with it just being 3 hours. Would we like to see it longer? Sure. But if you don't have the shows and you don't have the budget, why would you push it? So
we're not asking if it should get longer. We're asking if it should get shorter.
yeah. I don't think it needs to get shorter. I think 3 is the sweet spot. 3 hours is the sweet spot, and we should just keep that going as long as the block is still around. So, yeah.
Okay. So to reiterate, we are currently at 3.5 hours. And it has been ever since the Ninja Kamui sub was added at the end of the block, I think. So,
well, I think
JP,
let me just
what are
add.
your thoughts?
Let me just add real quick.
For your first question, I also agree with Paul. I do think 2 premieres is acceptable, especially for the first hour of the block. I would love to go to 3, but I believe that would be too much at this time. So I guess a 2 would be good. 2 premieres would be good. Should the block slim down? I do believe a good 3 hours is the perfect length for Toonami, especially at its current state. Just like y'all said, the 2012 revival lineup, 3 hours, and then it was on repeat. That was perfect. I wish they could go back to that. But yeah, I do think 3 hours of the block is good. I was going to lean into 2, maybe 2.5 hours, but I think 3 is probably the perfect time slot, the perfect length for the block.
Okay. Sam, too, what are your thoughts?
Oh wait, I just realized I didn't have my mic. I didn't have my mic. I had my mic muted before the Discord thing. So I was talking for a good minute. But so for the first question, I I I was a little confused at first because I thought, oh, like how many premieres? And I'm thinking, are we talking total premieres in a year? Or are we talking per block? And hearing the other guys, I'm like, okay, yeah, per block.
Yeah, per block. I mean,
Uh,
one would hope more than 4 premieres in a year.
So yeah, so like I'm kind of in agree. Like 2, it seems doable. I would like 3, but considering the way things are, I think 2 is fine. I mean, even if something gets reran that hasn't ran in a while, like people like to groan at Blue Exorcist, but me personally, I have not seen Blue Exorcist, so that's actually kind of new for me. But to go on to the other question about them slimming down, so like it's kind of funny. I jumped into Toonami really late. It was like 2015. This was after their massive drop to 6 a.m. to 3:30. And at the time when I was younger, I'm like, damn, it used to be 6 hours long. I wish it could be like that. And then I remember that brief moment in like starting in 2017 when they kept getting longer and longer, and then they had that drop again. Back then I used to be like, yeah, man, I want it to be 6 hours because I could pull all-nighters. I was still in high school at the time. Nowadays, yeah, I'm perfectly fine. I'm perfectly content that they are within 3 hours. Personally, I am fine if they keep it 3.5. I mean, like, majority of the time that I spent watching Toonami was during that 3.5 hour time slot, starting in 2015. Um, I 3 hours is fine. Like, if there's nothing else, sure. I would have questions if they went underneath 3, in my opinion. But, yeah, yeah, really, those are all my thoughts on it.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm gonna sound greedy because first of all, one of our premieres is One Piece, and One Piece can go on forever. And if you want your audience to stay interested, I'm sorry, as much as I love One Piece, it can't be your only other thing. So, in my opinion, they need at least 2 other premieres besides One Piece. 3 would be preferable, but it doesn't have to be 3 all the time. That's kind of my minimum level of this will make me care what you're doing. Now, granted, I'm going to watch every original regardless, and also anything else that interests me. But yeah, that's at least 3 premieres, including One Piece, is kind of the bare minimum for me to be like, okay, yeah, things are fine. I never thought that we'd actually get below 4 premieres, much less 3 premieres. So that was, yeah, eye-opening, I suppose. But they things can't last forever. And I think 2 hours is a little too short. It would be fine. I would prefer a well-stocked 2 hours to 3 hours where they really have to stretch. But I don't think that they've ever really reached the point where they can't fill the last hour with reruns. So I don't think it's too much to keep 3 hours going. I think 3.5 is kind of clunky, but they play Venture Brothers right after, so why not just make that Toonami? I don't. I want the Venture Brothers bumpers, don't we all? Don't we all want the Venture Brothers bumpers? But I digress on that point. I think 3 hours is good. I honestly do not think premieres after 2 a.m. are sensible at all. I'm kind of surprised they ever did it. And while it might be nice if Toonami were to shift up a little bit and were 11 to 2 instead of 12 to 3, I suppose that's maybe just not in the cards, but maybe it should be because they are premiering network originals on this thing and they run most of those in the 11 hour. So why is Toonami the exception? I would ask. It's kind of always been that way, but doesn't mean it has to stay that way. And yeah, obviously they got to prioritize their comedies and they super prioritize their Fox reruns to the point that there's quite a lot of them before Toonami starts on Saturday. Also, why don't you just put Family Guy directly next to Toonami instead of the Rick and Morty hour? Like it's like you got Family Guy to boost everything, but you're not really effectively using it to boost Toonami when you have an hour of reruns of Rick and Morty in between them. I'm just saying. Easy problem to solve if you just move Toonami up to 11. I think so. But yeah, I don't want to get too greedy, but I guess I'm greedier than y'all if 2 is satisfactory or at least acceptable. I think 3 at the minimum if you got One Piece in there, because you can't just have one thing in One Piece. That's just not enough, I think, to keep your audience interested. Maybe I'm wrong. I suppose it depends on what you're rerunning after One Piece. But I think so far we're pretty much in agreement that 3 hours is good. 3.5 is fine, but not necessary. But I don't think they've reached the point where they're absolutely desperate to fill time slots because they still haven't brought IGPX Season 2 back out. They haven't brought out Ghost in the Shell, and I almost can't believe Paul didn't bring that up himself. And I don't know, I think they might still have Attack on Titan? Maybe? I don't know. They got other stuff. Plus, they could just rerun more of these originals. I mean, it's been a while since Ninja Kamui's been on. That was, for all intents and purposes, pretty successful. And they could probably squeeze another run out of it this year. Just saying. There's options. Though they will be a little bit tighter on options if, in fact, Naruto and Sailor Moon are both gone by the end of May. That could kind of force their hand to either get really creative or slim the block down. But I don't think they're going to go below 3 hours. It would be a little alarming if they did go below 3 hours, but not necessarily a bad thing. I guess I don't really care so much about the amount of hours. I care about the quality of the hours. Yeah. That's what I have to say about that. And Sam 1, what have you got to say?
I view the number of premieres to be something that the network probably thinks a lot about. So they probably view their originals as one. They probably think of any pickup that they grab as another. So Blue Exorcist, even though it's not new to us, to them it is a new show pickup because it is airing on the block for the first time in 10 years. And then there are extensively just new pickups that they just get randomly through whatever distributor that they talk to. So they probably view the way that, because it's like we're already getting 3 premieres, right? It's the original, whether it be a rerun like Blue Exorcist or Sailor Moon or Naruto or whatever, they kind of count those. And then we have, the new stuff or returning favorites. So I think like 3 of those throughout the entire year is very healthy. It's fine if they aren't all new, even if we've seen it before. I'm fine with them rerunning a good show again if it means exposing it to more people. But they should also have more focus on, we need to focus in on getting these shows in a timely manner. It does feel like these deals nowadays are more complicated than they've ever been before. And in terms of just slimming down the block, I'm kind of in agreement. 3 hours. I'd probably make an argument for 2.5 hours, because I think 2.5 hours is a perfect length. You have your premieres up front and then one rerun.
I see your reasoning, but I don't like when it ends on a half hour. I just don't like it. I don't like it.
It's that OCD in you. I get it.
It totally is.
But I just don't see a purpose or reason to have it be 3.5 hours or even like 3 hours long if they can't make the first half of the block that interesting. So if they have the chance to slim it down and they can just cut off unnecessary fat, I do think that going 2.5 hours is fine. If you go to 2 hours, that's a little concerning for me because I think you could at least do 2.5 hours.
Yeah, they could easily do 2.5 hours. When they hit 3, it can be a little difficult to fill everything effectively. But yeah. The way they keep making sure that the block stays the same length, it almost feels like a band-aid. like saying, no, we're still doing stuff. We still stocked our block. It's things are good, things are fine. But if they took some of those away, if they took some of that time away, I think it would probably really get people to notice everything else that's kind of troubling here.
Yeah, if
That's
I could also jump in one more time, sorry. Um, I do think like for them not moving 3.5 hours, I think that might be a thing of viewer consistency. Like people will just like consistent schedules.
oh
Toonami's
yes,
been this lane
consistency.
for
Hmm.
there's been this length for so long. It's like, people come every Saturday, even if we have nothing. So it's like, sure, we'll keep it 3.5 hours for now. And if it dips below at certain points with viewership, we'll kind of think about slimming back. But it doesn't even seem like that's been affecting them. And obviously, like ratings are so different now than what they were in like 2014 or 2015, where viewership did mean a lot more. But nowadays, it's like, well, what is successful for Toonami? What is going to work for them in the long term compared to what worked 10 years ago or 5 years ago? That's the interesting questions that they obviously need to figure out, because I don't have the answers. If I had the answers for that, I would be here talking.
What are your thoughts, Chug?
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to be a little bit greedy here as well, and I'm going to confidently say 3 premieres is kind of where I am comfortable accepting. The block launched in 2012 with 3. We had Bleach, Deadman Wonderland, and Casher and Sins. Anything less than that almost feels like going backwards. That being said, I will say I think we're a little bit too harsh on the concept of reruns. Like it's very easy to look at something like Blue Exorcist and be like, "Oh yeah, it's just a rerun, like who cares?" But this aired 11 years ago. People who are 21 now, this aired when they were 10. Like we've all seen it probably because we're freaks, but a lot of other people have not been watching the block for that long. IGPX, I think, is another similar example to this. I remember seeing people complain about that being a rerun, and it's been a long time since I've seen IGPX. That was kind of refreshing to watch again. I liked that show more on that rewatch. As for the length of the block, I am actually going to be a little bit controversial here. I think there's a very solid 2-hour block in what we have. I don't think it needs to be 3.5 hours. I think you could lop off most of the back-end Toonami Rewind rejects, as well as the Fooly Cooly premiere, and it wouldn't really be too big of a deal. Or Fooly Cooly start, not premiere.
Yeah, I mean, we might be having slightly different thoughts if Common Side Effects was the first thing, and then it was Blue Exorcist, an hour of One Piece.
Yeah, it's a little not good, but that's what we have content wise at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on this, C. Kohler?
Yeah, so I'm in a similar boat. I think 3 premieres to me is kind of the minimum for a successful Toonami block. I prefer 4. That's really reaching. I know that might not be the perfect world that we could live in anymore, but I really want to emphasize something that Chug also just said that I agree with wholeheartedly, and this idea about what is a rerun, or maybe even what constitutes a premiere. So like when you go back to the very early days of the new Toonami relaunch, there were a lot of variety of shows that they were bringing onto the block at the beginning for the first several years. But yet a lot of those shows weren't like current shows. Like you would get things like Soul Eater, which aired on Toonami in 2013, but it was a 2008 show. Or you'd have Gurren Lagann, my personal favorite anime of all time, one of the most hypest shows ever. Again, aired in 2014 on Toonami, but again, that show was, I think, a 2008 show. So it was like, we're talking about shows that aren't new, but they're new to Toonami and they are popular or good shows. I think quality matters more to me than how new a show is. And maybe advertisers don't see it that way. I'm not sure, and I can't speak to that. But in general, if I want to have an exciting Toonami block and I were low on funds, but wanting to keep the block fresh, I'd be going back and seeing like what's in there, what's come out from these partners that will work with me, partners like Aniplex or Viz or Sentai. See what they've got, even if it's 6 or 8 or 10 years old. Go back and see what they have that we haven't seen on Toonami and give it a new life on Toonami. You know, we look at things like Mashal, Licorice Recoil, and while I am not a fan of SAO, those are all Aniplex shows, right? And Mashal and Licorice Recoil weren't that long ago. And I feel like there's still opportunities to get stuff from Aniplex that isn't new, but is new to Toonami and would be interesting for new viewers to see. Viz, they aired Zom 100 last year, a totally out of the blue thing. I didn't think Zom was a big thing, and that is relatively newer than some of the other stuff. But then look at like what they did with Sentai. For a while there, it seems like in 2023, 2024, there was like a real sort of Sentai partnership going on with Toonami, and they were showing a lot of the Made in Abyss and the Lupin shows. You know, they have a couple of other shows that are exclusive to I almost said hentai, excuse me, Sentai. Call of the Night, and one of my personal favorite animes that I think would be perfect for Toonami, and Chug knows where I'm going with this. This is Land of the Lustrous. Phenomenal show that ought to be on Toonami, should get eyeballs. Probably wouldn't cost them a whole lot to get because it's so old in the like realm of anime viewership. But who hasn't, you know, you think about younger people, again, like Chug was saying, who haven't really seen these things. Now, as far as the length of the block, does it need to be longer or shorter? I'll admit, once the premieres end, and again, when I talk about premieres, I'm talking about things like, you know, something new to Toonami that hasn't aired before. Anything that's aired on Toonami before, I consider a rerun. And so it doesn't make any sense to me from a programming standpoint to try to air a quote unquote premiere from 2 a.m. onward. I just don't think there's probably going to be the viewership there from your general audience. Now, we're different. We're all Toonami fans, and a lot of us stay up for these things. I used to stay up for the super long 6-hour blocks or whatever we used to have. But, you know, more recently, I tend to stop watching once it gets to be around the time for the reruns to start. And if you're trying to sell advertising, you're probably going to lose some return on investment trying to show something new on Toonami at 2 or 3 a.m. That's just my feeling. I don't have any evidence to back it up. That's just how I feel. So
I agree.
I think that if the block is around 3 hours long, that's fine. Again, if you're going to show reruns at the end, but just with the understanding that maybe diehard Toonami fans like myself aren't going to stay up for the reruns, but you give me 3 or 4 premieres and I'm there. And again, those premieres, they don't have to be the latest thing that just came out. I'd love to see the new episode of the new season of Dr. Stone on the block, and maybe that'll happen. But I'm also fine, again, with like going back and finding some rare gem that aired 6-7 years ago. Put that on the block instead of a rerun of Grunge.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that.
I actually kind of want to chime in one more time. I agree 100%. Like, what is going on where you can't even acquire something from Sentai Filmworks, a distributor that you've partnered with for your anime dubs, which you've done like for pretty much everything now, because now it's seeped into Warner Brothers' own stuff. Like, they did the Suicide Squad Isekai anime. They're doing the upcoming Batman Ninja movie. Lazarus is another one. Like, they are now doing your dubs for your shows, obviously, because they're a cheap option for Warner Brothers to use. But you do business with them by allowing them to dub your shows, but why not have that business be a two-way street where you also acquire stuff from them? It baffles my mind that at this point in time, we still have not gotten another Sentai show since Made in Abyss.
Yes, since Made in Abyss Season 2. Well, we're kind of dipping into a further topic, but we're still on this one. So, Kuro, what are your thoughts on the premiere situation?
Yeah, well, thanks, C. Kohler and Chug, for stealing all my talking points. Thanks. But I think actually they articulated very well what my thoughts are. I'm going to be ambitious here, and I think 3 or 4 premieres is completely acceptable, depending on how you view a premiere. I mean, obviously, network premiere, because we're thinking if Blue Exorcist season 2 and 3 came on, that's a network premiere. And Blue Exorcist season 2 came out in 2017. So it's not like that's a brand new show and they're gonna have to pay top dollar for. It's been on the air, but has everyone seen it? Probably not. It's really good, by the way. You should totally see it. One Piece is considered a premiere. So that's 2 right off the bat. 3, grab something from High Dive. We talked about on the Simuldub Saints episode, Blade of the Immortal. I only heard about this through watching some ads for shows that they were airing, and I was like, this looks so Toonami. It's violent. It's got really beautiful animation style. It's from 2019, so it's fresh, but not too fresh, and who the hell has heard of it? I certainly hadn't till I was out looking for stuff, and it's action. You know, you can find premieres that are still fresh, I say with quotations, but aren't new. And then I think one slot should definitely be an original premiere, which would be 100% new, not seen before. You air, you know, duly on Max. But you can play around with that model a lot. You can have one simuldub that's like a week or 2 off, and an original that you've put money into. So you've paid big money for these two titles, small money for these stale titles, I should say, but I'm using the term loosely. 4 premiere 2 hours, and then that gives you an hour and a half of reruns. Doesn't have to be super expensive. And then to help support that, the networks that they're dealing with, Aniplex, High Dive, Sentai, could advertise their own services during the play of these shows. Like, this could be a pretty sustainable model, self-contained, if thought out well. You know, this I would be ambitious in following my 2 predecessors and say I'd be really happy with 4. This is obviously an ideal, and it would of course fluctuate over the course of a year when the block fills out or when series end. But I think you could have 2 hours of, quote, premieres, meaning network television first time airing. And there isn't, this isn't even like the first time this has happened. Forget Toonami. Think about Sci-Fi Channel's Anna Monday, Anna Thursday block. They were airing Monster. That wasn't the first time that had ever been seen by audiences, but it was the first time on television. I mean, the only thing I remember seeing on that specific block that I had seen before was probably Gurren Lagann. The rest of those shows were completely new to me. I had never seen any of them before. Remember Chrono Crusade? Definitely didn't watch that. It may have been airing on the Once Upon a Time Funimation channel. Ah, the good old days. But it wasn't like it was on TV anywhere. It wasn't like people were like widely talking about it outside of very niche forums. So there's precedence for this sort of thing, airing shows that people have watched in a certain quantity and then having it air on a block outside of Toonami. That's worked. This model has worked. Now, I can't speak to why, you know, Sci-Fi pulled this, whatever. I loved the Anna Monday block personally, but my point is there's an example of this, and then obviously, as has been stated, Toonami has done something similarly. Doesn't have to be the first time it's been seen. And for the record, not all audiences who are watching this have seen every show. I certainly haven't. Like, I had never watched Parasite when it aired on Toonami. I would have to say that 90% of the shows that do air on Toonami, I haven't watched or sought on my own. You know, I had heard all the hype about Demon Slayer and was completely skeptical that was just another, like, you know, child shonen thing, and I was just uninterested, and it blew my mind. But I was only into it because I sat down to the Toonami block, so they have a lot of opportunity to influence an audience uniquely that they don't, that no other animated entity has. They can really create something, and it has worked in the past. It's proven to work in the past. So I think it's okay to be ambitious here. I think it's okay to push and say, yeah, let's do 4 premieres. As long as we're flexible about what the definition of premiere is, we'll have 2 hours of them and then an hour plus of whatever, which I think answers your second question about how long I think the block should be. As long as if we were to get the 4 fresh shows, anything after that, anything additional would be just candy and
Gravy.
yeah, it's gravy. I'll take it. I'll take all the gravy.
It's candy. It's candy and gravy.
Yeah. I'll take it. Whatever it is.
Sounds disgusting.
Play all the reruns. Play reruns up until 7 in the morning. Play them until 4. Play them until whatever the time you want. Maybe some of us will be there. Maybe others of us will be there. I think if they're just not spending money, if they're just playing stuff they have, that's fine. Who cares? Like they can as long as I think they maintain at least 2.5 hours for sure. 3 would be great, but like at least 2.5. That's kind of that's the sweet spot, you know. That's where I'd like it to stay.
Hey, just before you move on, to bounce off what Kuro said, I've said this time and time again on Twitter. Toonami will be perfect to team up with Retro Crush. They have a lot of good old animes that can definitely benefit the block. This is a model that can definitely work. And to bounce off what Kuro said, I remember watching Saturday anime on Sci-Fi back in 1995. That's how I got introduced with Akira. That's how I got introduced with Vampire Hearted D. Something like airing old animes that haven't been seen on television in a while or haven't been seen on television at all would definitely be the perfect formula for Toonami.
Now that's interesting, JP. You actually just rolled right into our next talking point. Actually, some of you have already sort of rolled into our next talking point. Well, not what was going to be our next talking point, but I'm just going to reorder them because it just makes sense at this point.
Can I propose an adjustment for the panel? Since we're talking about the block slimming down, why not take this opportunity also to discuss the latest news update of the what the lineup is that dropped today? Since we sort of crossed over into what our current model block would be ideal, let's talk about what the current model block is right now.
Well, listeners, if you didn't know, the recently announced as of today, March 8th Toonami schedule. Well, I'll go ahead and say the March 1st Toonami schedule. So tomorrow, you have a block that consists of this. Fooly Cooly Grunge, episode 2. They are starting a Toonami premiere run of Common Side Effects, the Adult Swim original series, which is very good, at 12:30. They are doing Blue Exorcist at 1. One Piece is still at 1:30. DBZ Kai has one more episode at 2. Naruto continues at 2:30. And Sailor Moon closes out the block at 3 a.m. The next week, March 8th, we will be bumping off DBZ Kai in favor of another episode of One Piece. This will probably last 2 weeks, maybe more. And Fooly Cooly Shoegaze will end up replacing Fooly Cooly Grunge on March 15th, right around Toonami's birthday. I hope they have, something going on their birthday weekend. I hope. And yeah, we're all kind of about this lineup. Some of us are happy that One Piece is doubling up in favor of just rerunning DBZ Kai, but honestly, if they still had DBZ Kai, I would not have been opposed to them kicking it to 3:30 just to, keep it around. But well, yeah. Is that what you wanted, Kuro?
Well, okay. So I wrote about this. We had talked about the lineup through a couple articles and expressing what a lot of people had posted on social media and were thinking. And I'm looking at it now. So from the first, we had, DBC Kai, as you said, and then to the 15th, it showed, as of a week ago, DBC Kai replaying. And there was a distinct discussion about, oh, wow, they're replaying from episode 1. And it was met with such derision, that this audience here, these people here that I discussed it with and messaged with, were outright derisive, to the point of dismissal. And then not a week later, they've eliminated that and changed it to a double One Piece. It's a little hard, and I granted that might be a bit arrogant to point out, but it's a little hard to not think that this might be slightly responsive to some of the comments. I can't say for sure, but it is interesting that we've had such a rapid change of schedule in such a short period of time. I actually don't remember. And Sketch, you are essentially the one with the sharpest memory of these things. When was the last time within a week we saw a schedule change like that from something we knew 2 weeks in advance? Up until the 15th, DBC Kai was on the schedule. And now the 8th and the 15th have no DBC Kai. I don't remember. It's hard not to see that as a response to things that were said.
Would have been like somewhere during like COVID era where they had to like constantly make changes.
But the COVID era I thought was great. I never had complaints. I think
no, because they were
mentality,
back then. Like back then, they were actually trying and they were being very creative, compared to now, where it's like, what's free in our library that we can run? Oh, cool. Here's a couple of new things.
Pretty much.
And everybody's recording from their home. Yeah, it's a little weird. There's definitely something.
We certainly hope they're listening.
Response.
Again, if they're listening, why aren't they playing IGPX Season 2? Come on.
At this point, it's been over a year too, so maybe it'll come off a little.
I don't care. I still want it.
I don't know. I apologize for the cat in the background. He's very frisky and he wants to play. So he's meowing at me.
The cat has entered the chat.
The cat has entered the chat.
Yeah. Well, some of you have already gone with your thoughts on how Toonami could potentially revitalize their lineup. So let's get deeper into that topic. So what do you think Toonami should do to revitalize their lineup, knowing full well that maybe they don't got a lot of money, maybe they don't got a lot of support from the higher ups, and they just kind of have to make do. But despite that, there's probably something they can do. And JP brought up an excellent point of partnering with Retro Crush. Do you have anything else you wanted to add, JP?
Other than the Retro Crush, I would say try to partner up with DC and see what you can get. I mean, I don't know why they cannot team up to give Toonami content. I'll, just have the conversation. Is there shows that we can air to help us out filling out these lineups? Pretty much DC helping them out, or go back to the Retro Crush, even Discotheque. Team up with all these. Hell, even team up with the smaller anime distributors. You got nothing to really worry about. You could pretty much be experimental, probably to a certain point, on which Warner Brothers will allow. But you really have nothing to lose now. Go out there and try to see what smaller content you can get just to fill up a lineup. Because these are old shows, but it'd be shown in fresher, newer eyes, or younger eyes that haven't seen these animes before. So that's just my take.
I agree. Though I will state that generally Discotheque does not have the television rights to the shows that they license, and they'd have to. Maybe with Lupin, for instance, they kind of worked with Discotheque to get that deal with TMS.
Oh,
So
okay.
there could be
All right.
instances where they can have Discotech work as kind of a bridge, or
Yeah,
maybe one of the other companies do that. So
yeah,
there's options. I mean, at this point, they can actually reach out to the Japanese distributors of these licenses and work out deals like that. They've had some success with making that happen.
yeah.
Uh,
Makes sense.
yeah. So, what are your thoughts, Sam? Two.
So, if we're talking about ways to revitalize, one thing I think of is like, Sketch brings up earlier about them bringing back IGPX. It's just, yeah, I feel like they have a vault that they can pull out of. Like, don't they own Ghost in the Shell standalone complex? Like, I feel like they could bring that in there. And yeah, like IGPX, I wouldn't even be mad if, say, they brought Samurai Jack in. It's been a minute since that aired. And then I don't know the extent, but I know like some of the animes that they aired that are still on their website, I wouldn't mind a rerun of, say, Zom 100, or like just. But then if we're talking about ways to revitalize, like, JP brought up those those lower companies and all that. Discotheque would be great, but yeah, they don't get TV rights. One thing that I kind of thought of, but it's still just an up in the air thing. We don't know what will happen, but lately Toho has been in the market of licensing the shows that they own themselves in the West. Like, normally it would be like through Crunchyroll and all that, but like now they've been all in on doing the distributions themselves along with G Kids, and we saw that with Dawn to Dawn, where you literally had that show streaming on Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll, like everywhere. They're doing it again with the new Gundam. They're doing it with the Witch Watch, I think it's called. And honestly, what I would wish for, although this is just wishful thinking, is that maybe Toonami can get some sort of partnership going there to, like,
Oh
because
man, that would be nice.
it would very much be nice, because I mean, that would be one big way to turn things around, because clearly Toho are not happy with Crunchyroll. There was an article that came back a few months ago about the state of things with Crunchyroll, and one of them being how not happy Toho are. And it's funny, when Don the Don got released to the other streamers, Crunchyroll was salty about that, and they were like, let's not advertise this because it doesn't exclusively belong to us. And yet again, with Crunchyroll being the way that they are, I feel like, say, if Toonami was to get some sort of partnership with Toho, that would be a really nice kick in the nuts that Crunchyroll needs. But aside from that, I still feel like there are, things that they own that they can pull out, to where it just doesn't have to be another rerun of Fully Cooley Grunge or Shoegaze, or, God forbid, another Uzumaki or Ninja Kamui marathon, or even Primal for like the 20th time. Um, yeah, that's really all I got.
Yeah, I would. I feel like the G Kids licenses and the Toho licenses are probably very expensive depending on the popularity of certain things. I don't know about something about like Witch Watch. Maybe that's kind of like Mashal territory. So maybe, but like Don to Don's got to be very expensive. But man, if Crunchyroll is giving you the cold shoulder, don't give them your money. Go to G Kids. Go to Toho.
Sorry to cut in, but just to say, if by some miracle Toonami did get Dawned On, in my opinion, I feel like that would be a huge win for them that they haven't had in a long time. But that, yet again, wishful thinking.
That wishful thinking. And I just saw Gundam G-Cux, and I would
I saw that too.
love that to be on Toonami. It's
I
like
saw that yesterday. Yeah.
Tsuramaki Anno Gundam. If this doesn't come to Toonami, it's a crying shame.
It's literally a mix of Fooly Cooly, Evangelion, and Gridman all in a Gundam show.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very fun. People should go see it in the theater if they can.
Please do. It's actually really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. I just want something fresh. And there's got to be something they can get from Sentai. Maybe there's complications because of AMC. We don't really know. But man, you don't have to get like a bunch of shows from them, but get one at a time at least. Why can't you even do that? They may not have the Crunchyroll library, but they have plenty of good options that have never aired on basic cable and would be great to be able to watch on this block. And potentially, you could bring new people to these shows because they're not on Crunchyroll. Basically, any anime that's not on Crunchyroll or not on Netflix, nobody notices. That is a huge avenue. I would even go as far to say, I know this is crazy, but like Disney licenses this anime themselves. They're already putting their shows on Adult Swim with Family Guy, one of their crown jewels of acquired programs. So why not put these Disney licensed anime on Toonami after they've run on Hulu for a while? Like, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but Disney's already providing shows to the network, so why not? I'm just saying. But in a more realistic ideal, there's got to be something you can get from Aniplex, from Sentai, even the fairly slim pickings of the Viz backlog. Get in contact with your Japanese partners. Like, I'm sure they're cooking something, but I'm really concerned that they're just too hyper focused on, oh, we got to get the next season of My Hero Academia. We got to get Dr. Stone. Gosh, I hope they get Dr. Stone. I really will be bummed if they don't get Dr. Stone.
If they don't get Dr. Stone, I'm going to riot. Sorry for cutting off.
But if it takes so long and it's so expensive to get these shows and they take forever to show up, that's not enough for your audience, man. Just move on. These shows are already popular. Get something that's not. There are so many anime that go under the radar. Just get something. And unfortunately, I don't think they really have anybody on staff that's looking. And that's a problem. Like, get an intern to look at this stuff, or, give us a phone call, say, hey, what kinds of shows do you think you should be on Toonami? Like, it's not that hard to look around. And it feels like you're just not looking at all. And that's, I was able to, ignore that for a long time, but at this point, we're at the point where just get something, something fresh, something that hasn't aired. It's not that hard. Maybe it is. I guess we'll never know. But why is it so much harder this year than it was last year? Last year was pretty good. We got some good acquisitions last year. It was fun. So what happened? You're obviously still talking to Aniplex. How come we don't have Mashal Season 2? How come we don't have Demon Slayer Hashira? Like, come on! Very frustrating. But I really think, it's not going to take that much. Toonami's far from dead. Toonami's going to stick around. We just want Toonami to no longer feel like a zombie. And all it takes for that to be accomplished is for them to just get something fresh. Get one or two fresh things that you can put on the block besides One Piece. That's it. That's all we need. That's all we want, really. We'll be satisfied with that. I really think that would go a long way to get people interested in the block again. Now, we'll probably never get to the point where there's that many people interested in a cable television block, but doggone it, you could try. I pass it over to Sam One.
In terms of revitalizing Toonami, well, there needs to be like a few things. One, they better hope and pray Lazarus is a fantastic show from beginning to end, and then they need to continue that by adding with Rooster Fighter. That also needs to be great. I focus on their anime stuff because their Western stuff, when it premieres on Toonami, it's fine for the most part. All their American cartoons that they premiere on there are normally fine and good, but their anime stuff is a lot more let's just say complicated to simplify things. But I also do think like they do need to look at what they currently have and go, okay, we want to grab something that's super cheap. Well, then how about you go out to your partners, be it Sentai or Aniplex, and just go, what's an old show that you have? What is something that we can get from you for super cheap that can also air on our little block? And it doesn't have to be something that is from the 2010s or even 2020s. I think for me, all I care about is good content constantly filling the lineup, so that way it feels like something is always happening. Because that was the thing of Toonami back in 2012 to 2019, is that something was always happening. You always got information, you always had them talking to you. Even if they never really were always going to be telling you everything, it was always that sense of like, oh, something's always happening, something's always going on. Oh, they got this big show, but they also got this really niche show right over here. And I kind of, we went back, I'm kind of going back to an old topic that we talked about. And I personally think, like, for me, what makes Toonami interesting is that, yes, you can have the big heavy hitters, but those smaller shows are kind of what also keep people interested. And I think that they need those smaller shows again. And if their focus is just, well, we want to just get the biggest and best, I think that's a wrong approach. Like, in today's world, and this is something I've complained about for years, is that you don't need big shows filling your lineup from midnight to 3:30. What you need is the big show and then a small show. The big show and then a small show. Making those type of decisions, obviously, like, the reason they get these big long runners is because they fill up a time slot for a long period of time, and also they're very popular. I understand why they go after those immediately, because those are going to be the one that people want to sit down and watch. But I do feel like that is something where they need to improve upon. Like, okay, we can't get these anymore, so let's get creative and try something new. And that's kind of where I feel like they should be going to revitalize interest in Toonami, is that there needs to be more of a balance on how they handle acquisitions.
Okay. Good thoughts. Good thoughts, Sam. What are your thoughts, Chug?
So, yeah, I think we need to, as fans, realize the days of the Shonen Jump block are kind of over. We're probably not going to go back to just having like all the banger current action shows on the block anymore. And in that regard, I think we kind of just need some more deep cuts. Stuff like Licorice Recoil and Zom 100, I think, are just kind of the picks you want to go for here. Just stuff that's a little bit more low key that not everybody has heard of. I think is just like, that's what's going to get people talking. That's what's going to get people kind of excited. You kind of have to make do on your budget and just get stuff that people don't know they want to see yet. Your Dead Man Wonderlands, for instance. I also think we kind of need to embrace a little bit more stuff on the Western side. Invincible, Fight Girl, and My Adventures with Superman, I think, are really good things to put on the block. Common Side Effects, in my opinion, probably should have just started on the block. I think you would have less of a bad reception to the reruns that you're kind of getting with that now. And I think just in general, they just need to save up some budget so they can buy the rights back to Symbionic Titan and order 100 episodes of that.
Preach. Pie in the sky. Pie in the sky. And what are your thoughts, C. Kohler?
Yeah, I kind of agree with everybody. I mean, again, Chug's right. I want to live in a world where the latest greatest anime, the big hits are coming to Toonami like they did 10 years ago. But I just don't think it's reasonable anymore. If we can get one, that'd be great. But we're not going to have a block full of those anymore. So yeah, let's dig deeper, find things. I kind of said this earlier, but yeah, let's look for something a little more. Doesn't have to be super old. Also, I want to talk a little bit briefly about what JP said about, like those 90s anime and getting some of those on the block. I kind of wonder if that would work or not. In my heart, I think it would be a wonderful idea. Like, yeah, let's expose younger people who never saw these 90s anime to shows and have their minds blown. I think it'd be wonderful. I kind of wonder, though, if the failure of Toonami Rewind might have put a stale taste in their mouth about that idea of doing something like that. I don't know, but yeah, there's certainly a well of wonderful content that could be brought back. But I think the safer bet, like Chug was saying, and some others, that kind of finding things that 10 or like 4 or 5 years old, even, it's probably a safer bet to go down that road. That's what you need to do. And like I said earlier, fun and fresh and invites people to tune in is when it changes. And what we've been stuck into a lull recently is that it's not changing enough. We're seeing too many things that we're just on. And that's what's really making it feel like it's in a lull. We need change-ups. We need change-ups so that, next month or the month after that, what airs at 1 a.m. is different than what it was the previous month. And it's not just a show that aired an hour earlier or an hour later. And I think just trying to find ways to acquisition things that could fill those spots, and maybe tone back a little bit of trying to do the original works. I know that DeMarco went on record as saying that originals were really they're hedging their bets on the idea of the originals because that's how you can guarantee. Well, let me put it in quotes. That's how you can guarantee viewership, quote unquote, because if you have the original, they can't see it anywhere else. That's what they're doing with Lazarus, right? You can't see it anywhere else. It's going to be on Toonami, then it'll be on Max. Nobody else has got it. That's how you guarantee viewership. That's how you guarantee ad dollars. But you can't always bank on that. I think for Toonami to be successful, you can't do that for 4 hours. You need maybe do it once, but then you still need that variety throughout the block that changes regularly.
Hey, let me bounce off to your question real quick. Because I actually agree with you, because when I say older anime, I'm talking about at least shows that I feel could fit the block. I'm not saying like go show every old 90s anime. Just say I think certain shows that that they think they can gain an audience. Because I agree with you, because a lot of these nostalgia blocks in general, has a hard time trying to maintain an audience. I think the most recent nostalgia block that has managed to work is Checkered Past, but that's a whole different topic. But other than that, there are a lot of these nostalgia blocks hasn't really hit the mark. I still believe it depends with care. It depends on what the network will allow, what the network is willing to risk showing. So I get what you're saying about that. Because I kind of picking like the top like non-90s. I mean popular shows, kind of like the more obscure shows that can probably pick up an audience that probably can gain the audience attention. So yeah, but I absolutely agree with you with that one.
Yeah, I unfortunately must agree that like 90s shows, I think Rewind proved that there's really not the market for that besides some nostalgia, that they really should go for things that are a bit more modern that just haven't been seen by the audience before. Now we pass it down to Kuro.
I'm going to differ from my predecessors and say that it's not what's airing that would revitalize the show. It's packaging and marketing. I think the best way to have real revitalization is have stronger communication with your audience through, dedicated social media channels outside of Facebook. A marketing campaign that partners with the fan base that's outreaching, like the different podcasts featured here, like the news channels like Anime News Network, etc. Different events, reciprocal advertising with the shows that they have. So let's say a Sentai show is airing on Toonami and they can product, and then Toonami can advertise during the whatever commercial base streaming product that's a Sentai show is airing, for example. So I think instead of looking at the shows, because we've talked a lot about what should air or what shouldn't air, I think what would do better for revitalizing Toonami is taking a step back and reaching out. You have a base audience that are going to watch regardless. So if you're trying to draw in fresh viewership into what you have, regardless of what you're showing, then you have to get creative with how you're reaching that audience. You have to have better form of advertising and outreach. You have to be a lot more communicative. Find the audience members that you lost, bring them back, be a lot more forward-facing and transparent with some of the actions. Like, don't necessarily tell us the week before a lineup's change, because again, as I've said before, no other network functions this way. Most network television shows have their advertising a new season weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. I just, off the top of my head, I'm remembering this random show that once aired on NBC. It was a kind of weird sci-fi spin-off of The Wizard of Oz, and it had Vincent D'Onofrio. I saw that show advertised for months before. Obviously NBC's big. NBC Universal, they have a huge budget and they can do that, but I'm pointing out that that's the norm. You advertise in advance. So if we want to really revitalize, but if they want to revitalize, I think they have to think outside the box. We don't just look at the shows, look at the packaging, look at how you're advertising, look at your outreach. Are you really maximizing your outreach? Are you only catering to your existing audience, or are you pulling back lost audience members, old audience members maybe that you haven't considered to bring back in a while, people that don't even know that Toonami's still a thing? New audience members, like people in their 20s who maybe like anime and have cable because they live with their parents who still have cable and they want to watch TV, and be up at midnight and watch anime. Like, there's definitely some untapped potential here, and they're not recognizing. And we have often offered ourselves up as marketing potential. We're here, we're willing to work with you. We will be flexible. There's definitely precedence for that kind of relationship, and there's certainly some that we've had in the past that we've tiptoed into. So that would be my ideal for revitalizing Toonami.
All good points. I personally don't mind the current packaging. If I didn't like how it looked, I probably would be really sick of it by now, but I think it works. But like,
Well, not, you know
it's
what I
been-
mean by
it's been
packaging.
three-
I'm
yeah, I know.
talking
It's
about
been
like
3 years. It's been 3 years.
I'm not necessarily talking about changing
It
the Tom
needs
or
a
Sarah model.
rebrand.
I mean, I'm ambivalent about that. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. That's not what I mean. I mean, like, do the people that they want to reach know that Toonami exists even? Have they done any models to determine that? That's what I'm saying. Do better outreach to your potential audience. There's definitely an untapped audience out there.
I think you're definitely not wrong there, Kuro, and I agree. I mean, the number of times, and I'm sure we're all run into this, where we see people mention Toonami, and it's 99% of the. Oh, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of times it's like, oh, I remember Toonami back when I was a kid, and it's like, how many times have you heard that? And you're like, it's happening now. It's on the air now. There certainly could be more outreach to make sure that people are aware that exciting things are happening on Toonami that are fresh and new. I agree. I think it's a combination of both. I think it's the block's got to be solid enough to keep viewers and to sell advertising. But yes, definitely the fact that I keep seeing people online saying, I remember Toonami when I was a kid, and not realizing that it's still a thing or that it came back. It's just too much. There's just not enough outreach to know that it's still going on.
Yeah.
I would say real quick, they need to get out. They need to get out of Facebook. That's the first thing they need to do. Facebook is just too out of touch. They need to expand their social media horizons, whether that's X, even though that's much worse. Probably Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. They need a better social media presence. And I was going to say this for the final question, but I'll elaborate it then. But they should consider doing a separate YouTube channel just for like old Toonami stuff, put old promos in, even if it's run by fans. They need to have a stronger presence online, and I do think something like that could help them out. But I'll save it for our final question.
Really quick, I just want to cut in because he was saying earlier about, oh, like people still don't know that Toonami's back, and people post, oh yeah, I remember Toonami, and I'm just reminded of that really stupid post that the owner of the anime.com hour made, where it's like, we started this because we remember Toonami as like, yeah, I literally saw it last week. It's like, what are you trying to do here? It's like, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah. I feel like posting only on Facebook just admits that nobody in your audience is younger than 30. But I don't know the best way to reach the kids. Maybe it's TikTok. They need an official TikTok. Just something. you could make some nifty little short things put on TikTok, just some kind of, like they did this event in Atlanta, and you gotta figure that the vast majority of the people that were there were like, oh man, Toonami's still on? What? It's been back since 2012? They probably didn't even think about that. But yeah. Well, we're getting pretty late here, so we're kind of combining our last two prompts. Is that obviously we all want to say our piece about original productions, though we've kind of dabbled with that a little bit. But yeah, we still have the other thought, which is oh boy, it is getting late.
Sketch, you forgot Paul.
Did I? Paul, do you have anything to add on how
I'm not
to
laughing.
revitalize Toonami?
100% laughing.
Well, you did forget about me, so
I didn't really forget. I just wanted to see if I could get away with not calling you.
What did you think I was going to make this a long thing?
I don't know. It is you.
You know me so well, but no, it's not going to be a long thing. Because pretty much everybody said everything that I was mostly going to say. I think when we're talking about branding, and maybe because it is so late, I'm not. Maybe I missed it, but are we talking about getting new graphics? Because that really needs to change.
No, not really.
Well, I think that needs to change because I'm kind of sick of the graphics.
I think they need to put some more juice into those bumps. I mean, they're pretty sterile.
The bumps right now are just awful because they're just Coming up next is Sailor Moon, and we're
Here's
back
a
with
clip.
more Sailor Moon. And it's basically like they used to be so creative 10 years ago with these bumps, and nowadays they can't even be bothered with them.
Man, and it'd be some really cute quip from Tom. Like he'd have a really clever little bit. That
Yep. Still kind of does it for the One Piece bumps.
I'm just gonna point out. Josh just said on the chat, and I have to say this: there's no love behind the bumps, and I thought that was a really great comment, and I shared
no
it.
love behind the bumps. I think
I will say
I agree because I capture them.
Let's see Kohler say.
Oh, I was just going to say that it was worse at a time. I can remember a couple of years back when we had bumps that didn't change for like 4 months or something. And that was pretty dire times. And at least now the bumps are changing on a semi-regular basis. So I do notice when we come back and the bumps are at least a new clip from the show. We'll never get back to the now, then, later, which I thought was the most amazing format and was the perfect format and super hype, but I think it eats up too much into their advertising time. So
it's entirely possible. Paul, did you have anything else that you wanted to elaborate on?
Well, like I was saying, graphics, I think they need to just freshen that up because that would definitely help. The only other thing I was going to say was I disagree with the sense that Toonami Rewind kind of stifled, so to speak, like having older shows on the block. I don't think that stifled that because those shows I feel like are the wrong shows that they should have picked, but they're again in the current state that we are, they really probably couldn't get better shows for Rewind. So I'm always of the belief that why not go back to the beginning to freshen up your block from shows that started the block. Work with me here. Yes, I know I'm a huge Thundercats fan. I get it, but Thundercats was there. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Robotech was one of the originals. Voltron. I mean, you have a new Voltron that just left Netflix and is in, other than on digital, is in Oblivion at the moment. So there's that out there.
That would be fun if they could make that happen.
Yeah. So I mean, you have these options of originals that maybe if you can get them, and I would think they were cheap at this point, you could put these back on the block and that would get the attention of at least some of the older people out there that still do watch cable and get it kind of revitalizes the block in that sense because you're not going to get anything that you don't do originally. You're going to get what Crunchyroll basically doesn't block. And if it's expensive, they're probably not going to pick it up. So why not try to reach out into other lanes? And I think we've kind of talked about that. So again, I'm not going to go too far into depth, but yeah, I think there are definitely ways to do this to not only bring people back, but also to bring other viewers in to see shows that maybe they've never seen and they never even knew were out there. I say Ronin Warriors to some people and they're like, what the hell is that? And then they watch an episode and they go, holy shit, when did this play on Toonami? And I'm like, yeah. So there's ways to do it.
All right. Boy, oh boy. We're kind of combining our last two prompts here, but here we go. How do we feel that Toonami can adapt to the current streaming era? And should they make more originals to help the block? Heck, do we think they're even making more originals besides the ones that we know, Lazarus and Rooster Fighter? I believe we start with Sam 2.
So wait, I gotta remember the question again. In terms of the originals, um, if, oh yeah, so the streaming. So I guess my first thing is like with the originals, and my thing is I used to be excited for them when we had like the very short-lived Adult Swim and Crunchyroll co-productions. I used to be pretty excited for those, and then they were just kind of eh. And then like I tried to get excited for the Fooly Coolies, and then the whole rug pull of the 3 episode thing, and then Ninja Kamui put me down, and then when Uzumaki came out, that really like was the final straw for me. So I'm of the camp of I don't want to say that they shouldn't make any more, but I will not miss them if they if they decide to stop. And that could change with Lazarus and maybe Rooster Fighter, but I'm of the camp that I will hold any thoughts and any expectations until the whole show comes out. Mainly just because, oh yeah, that trailer looks nice, but how much of that is from the first 3 episodes? Um, in terms of adapting to the streaming era, that's kind of a touchy thing. I feel like them doing the airings of like, oh yeah, watch it here and the next day on Max. I feel like that's fine. I never had an issue with that. Um, and I guess like another thing is that like yeah, they they could get these older shows. You know, like if Crunchyroll had freaking common sense, you'd be like, oh, do you like watching My Hero Academia? Well, you know, the rest of the show and many more are streaming on Crunchyroll or like stuff like that. You know, like they could even if they get an older show, where like they could be like, hey, you know, you really like this show, well, it's on this service. I don't know, like I'm just spitting ideas here, but yeah, like I'm not really clear on the whole how they can adapt to the streaming era. Um, honestly, that's really kind of tough to say when you got like not even just Crunchyroll, but Netflix and now Disney hopping in.
Mm.
My only, I guess, real opinion is I know Disney has been going hard with like their Hulu stuff, and like they do, and I see a lot of cross promotion. Like I watch FX occasionally, and I know that they do a bunch of those Hulu shows. Like they'll do brief airings on FX or vice versa, and that's like something they could kind of do, like with their, if Disney had common sense and say like, hey, you like these shows? Well, there's a lot more on that on Hulu, but yet again, wishful thinking. But that's how I feel with the streaming era, and yeah, like the originals, in my opinion, like I've been burnt so many times, and I'm just like my short answer is I could not care less, in my opinion. I hope Lazarus is great, I really do, and the same could be said for Fire, but it's like I'm going in with absolutely zero expectations, and if they make more, I mean, like, I wish they could make. Oh, well, no. Let me back that up. Like, I will watch. Like, I will have. I will be seated if they make more. But I'm still of the camp of I'm not going to miss these. So yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I feel about it.
Well, we bemoan the originals for their quality or lack thereof to a great extent at this point. And it was rough. It was rough last year. It was rough. Rick and Morty, the anime, the absolute fallout of Uzumaki after Fooly Cooly grunge years prior, and just a lot of mediocrity overall. Though there were some bright spots, but despite all that, despite how we feel about how those shows turned out, for the most part, other than the ones that got written off because they were partially Crunchyroll, they have been successful for the network, for the company. They sold enough digitally. They did well on Max. They got decent enough ratings for their time slot at the time. So, yeah, I think originals are actually working. They're few and far between, of course. And, I think almost all, if not all, of the goodwill has been completely diminished at this point, and Lazarus has to do some very, very heavy lifting to improve the morale on that front. But despite all that, they work. They work, and they're exclusive content, so I think they should keep making them. I'm not entirely sure if they are making more. I kind of feel like they might not be, especially after the performance of that Lord of the Rings animated film, which was good, but obviously was kind of sent out to die. But it served the purpose that they intended it for, which was extending the license. But let's not get into that. I think originals are a good piece to continue forward, but it can't be the only thing other than just generally revitalizing the lineup. I think an aspect that Toonami could really, really invest in would be a fast channel. I've seen people in the comments section right now that say they should bring back Toonami Jetstream. Yes, they should bring back Toonami Jetstream as a fast channel. They should partner with Viz, or I don't know, maybe even Aniplex, Sentai, Toei, TMS, whoever they can. Put their originals in there, put some acquired stuff in there, make it all dubbed shows, because dubbed shows are on fast channels a lot less than the subbed ones. Like, there's already a sub channel for Sailor Moon, Naruto, One Piece, and Lupin, but not the dubs. Well, there actually is some of those dubbed, but not One Piece, not Sailor Moon. So do that. Experiment with that. People are really getting into fast channels because of all the streaming options that are driving people nuts, and nobody wants to pay for anything. And it kind of brings back that wonderful feeling of just turning it on and watching whatever's in your face instead of having to endlessly scroll trying to find something on demand. We've all been there. We've all experienced the choice paralysis. I can't talk. Paralysis. There we go. The choice paralysis that may occur whenever you boot up Netflix or Hulu or Crunchyroll, because there's just so many shows. But Toonami could really do something with that. And Warner Brothers Discovery does have some fast channels, but they only have one for animation. It's the Cartoon Rewind. Toonami seems like a perfect brand for that kind of thing. And I think that would be a great way to just get people to notice that Toonami's still around. Now, obviously, you should be promoting the main block on there so that more people realize that it's still on TV if they care to watch. But I think that's a great way to revitalize the brand and, just improve your social media, man. You're doing nothing. You're doing like less than nothing on social media. And how else are you going to get people younger? Like, I even want to ask all the people listening live right now, how many of you, I'm sorry, this is a little invasive, but how many of you are younger than 30? Be honest. I just want to know.
Me.
All right. Well, there's somebody in the panel.
One. That's just one.
That's one in the panel. Okay.
One and a half. One and a half. One. The other Sam is turning 30.
Both the Sams are.
There is
the
no
youngins here.
shame in being in your 30s. No, shame.
Absolutely not.
It's actually the best years of your life. I promise. I know I'm 120, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And a 120-year-old cat demon.
Yeah.
Only 120? I would have thought more. Well, anyway.
Don't ask questions. You never ask a lady how old she is. Sketch.
Not even a cat lady?
Look, I gave you at least a century. Can we just live with that? Can we all live with the century?
All right. All right.
Like, are you
Okay.
trying to tsunade me? Do I need to put the beat down?
Please don't.
Children. Do I have to send you to your rooms?
Please don't. Please don't. Okay. Sam 1. What are your thoughts on should they continue doing originals, and you know, what's the best way that they can continue in the streaming era?
So when we're talking about the first part with like their originals, this is a machine. It's constantly, these deals have always been in fluctuation. I'm sure that they have been working on getting originals, and I think I'm pretty sure they're for the most part all lined up for the rest of the decade, basically. Minus maybe a couple things that they may have been working on with Crunchyroll before all that went to shit. But I think they'll still make them. Whether or not they get received well, I mean, does the network really care about that? I mean, all I think they care about is just like viewership, and that's it. Does this show succeed in its time slot that it does? But then again, what is success in the streaming era? Do they look at max numbers? Does it trend on max? Do they look at that type of data? I don't know. They have more on hand. I can only speculate. But in terms of like how can they adapt to a streaming era, I mean they already are. They're doing next day on Max. That way they are advertising that this show is going directly into the streaming service. Yes, that's not directly advertising Toonami, and I do think that Max as a platform should advertise those brands more. But I also understand that Toonami appeals to a very specific audience. It is specifically targeting anime watchers and the casual person. The casual person who tunes into Adult Swim, they don't know any of this. They do not look up the Facebook schedule. They do not follow the block like we do intensely. But I think if they want to extend that reach, extend Toonami's viewership reach, I do think maybe having a fast channel would be needed in some ways. Maybe have it be that extension of Toonami Jetstream, where you have these licenses to these shows and you make that effort to be like, okay, we'll be on Pluto TV or whatever, and we'll have this fast channel that's 24/7 of these select titles that we have in our library that's also originals, but we also have stuff that you might like maybe they could talk with Toei and be like, hey, we have DBZ Kai rerunning on here. It's like this many episodes long. Like, that is a way to extend that brand, but it's also not a way for them to replace it, because it is not a way to replace it, because you can't really replace what Toonami currently is. Toonami is a social experience. You come in every Saturday and watch it on the block. It is that social experience that people want from Toonami.
All good points. I agree. I mean, the only reason that I really push for fast channel over some kind of on-demand thing is because that is how you continue the linear experience with streaming. That would feel like Toonami to me, as opposed to just having a tab on Max that's the Toonami section, which frankly is something they should probably still do. And maybe it would help Toonami get shows if they could like figure out a way that they could license them for Toonami and Max. Maybe, just a thought.
I think that would be a lot more complicated and out of the reach of what Adult Swim is willing to do.
That's entirely fair. Chug, what are your thoughts? Uh-oh. Chug's become a robot. Whoa. This is new.
Does that sound better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So for the first question of just what can they do, or are they still making Toonami originals, and are they going to make more, or should they make more? I think the answer to both of those is yes. like, I would not be shocked if they have more in the pipeline aside from the Rooster show. That just feels like something they've been going into for a while. As far as the quality of them goes, I'm kind of with Sam. I don't really think it matters to the actual company itself as long as it's doing numbers. Would I like them personally to do better on the quality control front? Yes. But like, I don't think that matters to the actual corporation here. And yeah, as far as adapting to the streaming era, the original shows are kind of the way to do that. The avenues keep closing to them as far as acquiring shows go, so you make your own. The issue with that is, again, people are going to kind of lose faith in those if they are constantly of a subpar quality. And two, I just don't think they're going to be able to sustain that on like an activity level. Like, you're never going to have like 3 Toonami originals at the same time. I mean, maybe you can, but that seems kind of insane production-wise.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's like a future for the block.
Sorry if I could jump in. I do think like airing 3 at the same time. One, they will never do that because they don't want to overflow Max. And two, they don't want these originals to overstep one another. They have to be like, obviously, like last year they had like 2 originals running at the same time, but Rick and Morty anime was already running at that time, and then Uzumaki was a short little thing. It was supposed to air years ago, but of course, reasons happened for that. But it's like one of those things where it's like, yes, I too would like quality control of these shows, but they don't care about that. I'm sure they would care a lot about that if it mattered to the ratings. But, you know, for the most part, all they care about is, was this cheap to produce? Yes. Did it do well in viewership? Yes.
Yeah, and as long as you're hitting those check marks, then yeah, I think it's something worthwhile for them to pursue and something that they're going to want to pursue. And yeah, putting those on Max the next day is again the way to adapt to the streaming era. If you aren't watching cable anymore in 2025, that's your way to watch it. I wish it would kind of feed back into Toonami a little bit more, maybe for those Toonami originals, and that place where they put the commercial bumper in for just like a random show on Max. Maybe put like a little Tom bumper and just tell them you can go watch this on Toonami. But I don't know if that would ever happen, but I think it'd be cool.
It would be cool.
But yeah, I think the priority for Warner would probably be the reverse, to direct people to Max instead of direct people to cable. And in that regard, they're probably doing the best they can. And yeah, that's about all I got for this one.
Thank you, Chug. What are your thoughts, C. Cooler?
You guys kind of already hit on one of the things I wanted to mention, which was this idea of having shows in a linear fashion. One of the things that drew me into the Toonami fandom, and something that is what keeps me coming back, is the group watch. It's there's a time that you're going to watch this. And yes, I'm an old fogey. I'm not a hip kid who wants to have everything on demand. I actually don't like when shows come out on Netflix and it's the whole season on a day. You know, there's no water cooler talk when you do that. It's like everything is just all at once and then forgotten. But more so, this idea of a group watch. It's the one thing that Toonami has in its cable presentation that is unique over streaming, in a certain sense, is that when you want to watch Lazarus, and we're all going to watch it, it's only going to be available at a certain time on that Saturday night. And that's what's going to be the moment we're all in on it. And that's what makes it special. And that's what makes it like a fun thing. How can you do that in a streaming era? Well, you talked about like these streaming like things you could do where you maybe stream Toonami shows and you do that linearly. That's an option, you know, something like that. I mean, let's look at things like, and what about younger people? Like they're into live streaming, let's plays, reaction channels. Heck, I'm into live streaming, let's plays, and reaction channels, and I'm not a young person. But if Toonami was available outside of cable, it needs to be, in my opinion, to be successful or to have the spirit of Toonami, needs to be something you have to set your clock to and watch, and not just be something that's on demand. Because at that point, you're just Crunchyroll. You're competing with Crunchyroll, and it's not. You're not going to get anything out of that outside of the exclusives, which leads me into the originals. So yes, what you guys said about the originals, absolutely right. They're going to continue to make them. I never really think too much about like, do they care if they're successful or not? I mean, it's a sad state if they don't, and that's a very likely scenario. At the same time, we know, and I know DeMarco had talked about this in the past, like they were actively trying to make these things happen. It wasn't a situation where, and maybe sometimes it was, but for the whole recently, they weren't like waiting for someone to come to them and be like, I have an idea for a show. And they're like, oh, let's make it. I know that's happened, but I think more recently it's been like, we need shows. And so now they're reaching out to creators and being like, can you make something? Which is not a really great way to start the process of getting a great piece of content. Because if you're just pushing a creator person to be creative and they're not invested, then, you know, you end up with shows that just really aren't that great. Or it's something where like someone just has an idea. It's like, hey, remember Shenmue? We should make a show about that. And it's like, well, did that come from a place of like deep love and passion, or was it just like a, hey, this is something we could do and we've got the rights to it kind of situation? I don't know the answer to these things. I like to think that in the perfect world, people would see Toonami as a place to premiere their original works, but I think it's the other way around. I think it's more like Toonami needs content, so they're reaching out to find it, and they're probably going to continue to do that for the reasons we've said, where they've got exclusives and then that brings people to watch. So again, when it comes to the cable situation, I don't know what to say there. I mean, they've been battling this for, a decade now, and they're well aware of the problems with cable decline. And if you're talking more about the idea of like, how does Toonami outlive cable? Well, then some of the things you guys have suggested as far as like making Toonami a streaming, not a network, but like a streaming channel or a streaming thing you could access, but have it be where there are time slots and things so people can group watch and share and maybe even have interactions in real time like we do when we group watch. That would make it exciting. But as far as cable's concerned, they're beholden to what they can get and what the advertisers will purchase.
You honestly just gave me the thought, and we're live streaming on Twitch right now. It's like, ooh, Toonami live stream on Twitch. I don't think they could ever do it, but man, it'd be pretty cool. It'd be pretty cool. Okay, Kuro, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick because I know we're getting late here. Look, I know that Toonami fans tend to be very persnickety about these Toonami originals. And I have to point out, there is a lot of crap animation out there. Like, absolute garbage, okay? And these originals don't even come close to that level of crap that
I agree.
able to access and consume at a level that we never were able to 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. It's all in its infancy. So the stuff they're producing, maybe it's not a 12 out of 10 every single round, but it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. I think that we get very picky about the quality. We have certain expectations about things like plot and story development, and I mean, putting Uzumaki aside, because that, I think there were very specific production issues at play with that one.
Oh boy.
I thought Ninja Kamui was excellent. I loved how the newest two Fooly Coolies played around with different animations. I actually think that Blade Runner experimenting with different animation styles is really great. Like, this is something that Toonami can do on its own that could be it is a lot of fun. Like, maybe I'm alone in this, but I like seeing that level of creativity. So reaching out to creators like Kohler says, about trying out different experimenting, giving them that creative freedom to say, all right, what have you got for us? Well, let's try this style of animation. Like Toonami definitely is the format for that because they've traditionally been edgy. So I think that we need to give a lot more credit to the originals that have aired and the originals that could air. And if we go back to a previous question where we talked about what a premiere looks like, I said that one should definitely include an original. I think an original, if we're a lot more flexible to include an Adult Swim original like a Common Side Effects as well, to that, not just a Toonami, but a Cartoon Network or Adult Swim or Toonami original, etc., whatever, an entire network original premiering, then yeah, maybe you could have one a year. And I think that is, as long as they're pushing it the next day on their Max channel or their streaming service or their partnership, it's definitely something that helps establish the brand. It helps strengthen the brand, and it's something you need to have as sort of your rock, your fundamental. Like Tom, an original should be a little bit close to where Tom and Sarah are, not per se equal to it, but like, this is a Toonami thing. It's been a Toonami thing for a while, and it's going to continue thing. And also, like, come on, everybody, stop being so persnickety. These are solid shows they're putting out. There's a lot of garbage out there. Let's all just take a step back and appreciate the fact that we're getting something that's actually really enjoyable to watch with a community of people that are enjoying it and commenting on it as well, because you can always go to your Crunchyroll account or your High Dive account. You're going to do that anyway, most likely, unless you're the handful of people who don't. Like, you're going to go watch something else anyway. So don't come here expecting to see what you're seeing already on another channel. You come here for something different. So definitely original is the way to go. And I really appreciate that I'm not the only one who has stated such. As far as keeping up the streaming era, I mean, if they're looking at the money-making aspect of it, partnerships with other entities, partnerships with other distributors, certainly one aspect of it, with reciprocal advertising. And I'm not talking about Crunchyroll, because there are other entities besides Crunchyroll that they can work with. I also think your idea, Sketch, about a fast channel is great. I have completely moved to the fast channel watch in my own personal viewing. Like, that's my go-to.
Great.
Yeah, I turn on, like, lately mine has been NYPD. I haven't watched that in years. And I turn on, I'm just kind of scrolling through Prime, and I'm like, this, and I could put it on in the background. I don't have to commit to it. And if I want to, I can sit down and watch it, or I can play a game on my computer and watch it, or I can F around on my phone and watch. Like we still, as much as people only will put money into streaming, we as viewers do kind of crave the benefit of having cable, because it's hard to make decisions. We just want to kind of let the network decide for us. We're overwhelmed by all of the options. I know I am. So if Toonami had its own partnership streaming fast channel, like, yeah, I would 100% have that playing while I'm cooking, while I'm cleaning my kitchen, while I'm fucking around on my computer, like while I'm writing any number of different things. That would be the best way for Toonami to recoup their money too. Like, if they're looking at, we want to post it, we're making your money for Max, we're making your money on these ways, like this little block, the way it is just one faction of it, one way to sell these advertisements. But if the bulk of it is replaying these shows on their fast channel, the shows they already own, all the shows they already own, that significant library so I think there's some push and pull here. I think there's some flexibility, and I would really just love to be a fly on the wall when these discussions happen at the corporate level, because I'm so curious about whether or not they've even explored all of these things that we've talked about just through the past 3 hours. There's been so many great ideas here. And yeah, we're just fans, but you can tell they've been thoughtful comments, and it comes from a place of loyalty and passion. And I would love to know if that level of passion is exhibited in these boardrooms with these discussions about where the block is going. And if it is, that's not showing. So let's let that show a little bit. Give us that level of passion that we have come to expect, because we're still here. We're loyal. And there's not just one way to keep this going. And if we can come up with all this, and who are we, then surely all of these intelligent minds sitting in these boardrooms can come up with this too, or better.
One could hope. Yeah, anytime I see people say that any of the Toonami originals are bottom of the barrel anime, I'm like, excuse me, how much anime have you watched? When I saw the list people put out for the worst animes of last year, and Rick and Morty the anime and Uzumaki were both on there, I'm like, no, you're being ridiculous. Rick and Morty the anime is fine. It's not that interesting, but it's fine. Uzumaki definitely had a troubled production, but it's still a pretty good horror show despite its foibles. You're being ridiculous if you're putting those in your top 10 worst things of last year. But I digress. As we've been chatting, you can't see the chat. Twitch chat, you can't see our chat, but a lot of folks have actually been bringing up the point of, yeah, they don't have to necessarily do co-productions. Co-funding shows is also an option, and maybe they're doing some of that. Really, the thing is, if it's so hard to get shows from various distributors, get in on the ground floor on these things. And I think Rooster Fighter is an excellent case of this. That's still a co-production, still a Jason DeMarco, Joseph Cho, Sola Digital Arts production, but they're partnering with Viz, kind of like how they partnered with Crunchyroll before AT&T sold off Crunchyroll. But yeah, I really think that would be a great way to go forward, so that they could, maybe, get in on these adaptations of not necessarily the most popular stuff, but, something that people are going to care about. That'd be good. And I think Sequeler made an excellent point that if you're making these shows, or rather you're coming to producers and like, hey, can you make a show for us? You're like, if they're not really into it, then what kind of product are you going to get out of that? That is something that they should be a little more concerned about.
Yeah, I can't really say if I know that's what's happening or anything, of course. And I also want to say too that Kuro, I agree with you that like this, we tend to be extra hard because we're passionate about Toonami, and I think that some of the shows that they've made, we're probably harder on them than we should be. And I think a lot of that also comes from the fact that they've made really great shows before. Like I said earlier in the podcast, Space Dandy was phenomenal. Why have they not aired season 2 of Space Dandy in like forever? I don't know why. I think they own that. It's an amazing show, and they make.
I don't think they own Space Dandy.
I thought they did.
No, because I think they acquired it from Bandai. They might have had some type of special deal where they're like, yeah, we'll pay a little bit for this, but I don't think they own anything of it. I think they may have lost the license, and they may have had to reacquire it back in 2018 from Funimation.
It's really funny that you bring up the Watanabe show, because
there you go.
The Lazarus, people have been so on the fence. Like, they're like, I really hope it's good, but I'm skeptical. And I feel so offended by that attitude. Like, where do you get off? Watanabe, first of all, is a genius. Everything he's put out that I've seen has been on point. And then immediately, because it's on Toonami and 10 out of 10 anime every time, you're going to be all negative. Come on, people. Let's get a reality check here. This is a good thing. This is
I mean,
a good thing.
as somebody who has been going through the Watanabe catalog, I can say that I did not care for Terror and Resonance. And I certainly, at this point in time, because I need to watch more of Carol and Tuesday, but I am certainly not feeling Carol and Tuesday
What?
right
Sam,
now.
we can't be friends anymore.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
kidding. Carol and Tuesday is precious.
Cowboy Bebop's kind of mid, not gonna lie.
Yeah, same.
You know what? I just quit all of you. I quit all of you.
I was joking.
Really quick, I want to cut in here because it's like, oh yeah, Watanabe, he's made the greatest, and I'm like, but when Ninja Kamui got announced, and I heard Sung-Gu Park responsible for the first season of Jujutsu Kaisen, and he also did was it Gata High School. I was like, oh damn, like this guy. Oh my god! Whatever this guy does is gonna be amazing and all that. Cause I had that same feeling, and then when those first few episodes of Ninja Kamui dropped, I was like, yes, this is the quality I expect. And then the rest of the show. So like that's all I really gotta say about that. I'm not saying I'm doubting Watanabe. No. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just like still keeping my expectations in check.
I think that's entirely fair to keep our expectations in check. It's like, yeah, Watanabe's Watanabe, but who wrote it? Who wrote it? That's all I'm saying.
That's why I'm so out of left field and confused and scratching my head about Rooster Fighter. Like, I don't know if this is true, but I heard from somewhere that like the idea of making the Rooster Fighter anime came from like somebody at Adult Swim told
Christy Caracas showed the manga to DeMarco and was like, you should make a show of this, and DeMarco was like, yeah.
I'm just like, really? That's what you're gonna hedge your bets on? That? Okay, we'll see.
As somebody who has read the Rooster Fighter manga, as long as the anime nails the tone of the manga, it's going to be a great fucking show.
I'm glad to hear that. I hope so.
Glad to hear it. And apparently, Viz is having a panel at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle next weekend, and they at least implied that they're gonna mention some Rooster Fighter. I'll be at the panel. Okay. Paul, do you have any final thoughts on this?
You sound like you don't want me to talk, Sketch.
Don't be ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Can't remember who said it because it's so late at night, but to bounce off of one of you, one thing that kind of turned me off to originals was how Fena Pirate Princess show that ended up. I was like, what do you mean you only meant to do this for one season? Like this, you acted like this was going to be like something that was going to go on for longer. And I'm like, oh dear God, are we really going to do this? And then Shenmue, which was really good in my opinion, like was a casualty of Crunchyroll being sold off. And I'm just like, oh, this show is actually really good. And so it did kind of put a bad taste in my mouth about having originals. But the one thing that I wanted to point out that I don't think that we talked about, and I kind of noted this while everybody was talking. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but when let's take Ninja Kamui for example. When Ninja Kamui was playing, obviously next day it's on Max. Let's see, I think it would be Sunday, it would come out at some point. I don't remember the exact time. It would be in the top 10, if not be almost number one.
It did well. Did really well.
For me, when I see that, I go, well, they're not going to stop. They're definitely not going to stop if it's doing that well on Max. That's a good sign. And also, Jose puts up all the time of how it's doing on Apple TV No, not Apple TV, iTunes.
Yeah, Apple TV, iTunes. It's the same backend.
A lot of those originals have done really well on there. So,
like I mentioned,
yeah. So I mean,
even though we may not like them that much, they're working.
Yeah. So I don't think they need to get rid of originals. They need to keep doing more. I completely agree. Don't do more than one don't do more than one at once, because that's just gonna hurt both shows at the same time. As far as the streaming part of this goes, and I don't understand what is going on at this point, because it's really confusing. When they announced HBO Max at the time, and obviously they've changed it to the name of Max, they were saying that they were going to have a package that included having the cable networks on there. All the Turner, Warner Brothers, Discovery, whatever channels on there. And they have yet to do that. And I feel like,
because other services have already done it.
Exactly. And that's why it's kind of like, well, if you're doing it, if other people are doing it, and by the way, you've said you're going to do it, why is it not on there as another package on top of whatever? That would be synergy right there that would actually help Toonami, because, let's face facts. Some people that are exclusively streaming, they get bored of just looking around for whatever show to watch. If you have those channels on there, people just even in boredom are going to tune in and be like, oh, what's Toonami? Oh, wow, this is on there. And then we're talking about even the reruns of shows that aren't on Max, and people are like, oh, why isn't this on Max? I need to watch this more. And then they learn, oh, the Adult Swim app has them. And there you go. So I think if they were to finally do that, that would help. And obviously, what everybody has mentioned, fast channels, a fast channel would, I think, help as well. Can they get enough shows for it? Probably not. But it would certainly help if they could. And yeah, I mean, it's not really that hard, and they've basically already said that they would do this kind of stuff, and it's like, why aren't you doing it? Like, just put the channels on Max and everything will be fine, and you'll do well. Oh, and by the way, that 17% drop in ad revenue that you had on cable last year will actually go back up because it's actually on Max, and people are actually probably watching more. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Paul. And last but certainly not least, JP, what are your thoughts?
Well, to go to the first question, should they stop making originals? Absolutely not. As long as they're making originals, the Toonami still has life. And like everybody else said, as long as the networks are happy with their originals, we should be happy that they're happy about that, because it gives Toonami more longevity. We want these originals to succeed, no matter what the quality of the shows are. And to pick up to somebody else said, these shows hasn't been on the level that we want it to be. But how many times we've given Netflix a chance with these live adaptations of these animes until they got one right with One Piece? We all know that Toonami is capable of making a good original Toonami show. And how they can adapt with the streaming platforms now. I agree. Bring it back to Toonami Jetstream as a fast network can definitely work. I'll go a step further, and it picks back up to what I said before. Why not make an official Toonami YouTube channel, or at least have more Toonami-oriented 24/7 marathons on the Adult Swim channel. I think they did that before once. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, whatever.
They did.
Yep. I think having our own Pacific Toonami channel could work because going back to wrestling, WWE has our own Vault channel where all they post is old stuff that we haven't even seen in a long time or we haven't even seen before. So something like a old school Toonami, like it doesn't have to even be old school, it can be just Toonami oriented, but you can post old interviews old interviews with people that you've interviewed. I think they interviewed Reedman, all those old stuff, probably old promos, old bumpers like that, probably some behind the scenes stuff, just to keep the name Toonami in people's mouths and keep today's generation knowing that, hey, we're still here. We don't need a crypto running anime block on a network that nobody has and people only watch that network because of TNA wrestling to tell us that Toonami no longer exists, to remind us what Toonami once was. And I mentioned this on Twitter. No block is going to restore the feeling. You can't restore the feeling. You can't, try to build a legacy that Toonami built. Toonami built that feeling. Toonami just needs to expand on their social media, like we said. But I do believe a Toonami Vault channel is definitely could help them out, even if it's temporary, even if it's not run by the official people running the company. Maybe they can have fans make their own Toonami channel, and they can co-sign with it and promote that, so people can glue into what they're showing right now. All I can say is, I think a lot of people was hard on their originals, and even I was hard with Ninja Kamui. I was definitely hard on Uzumaki because that disappointed me. Animation wise, it disappointed me. Rewatching it, okay, I kind of gained my confidence back in them because we know we're capable of better. There's a lot more worse animes out there that was worse than Uzumaki, that was worse than Ninja Kamui. If people put that below in their top tier, they're crazy. But so, yeah, Toonami should definitely continue with the originals and continue to just try to adapt with the times that they have now.
Well said, JP. Well said. Well, listeners and live watchers, we really appreciate you sticking it out for this entire time. And we also appreciate the entire panel for sticking it out this entire time. We should really, really start wrapping up, though. So I think we had a wonderful conversation here. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. And just go ahead and go down the line. Thank you for joining us, Seacoler.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I thought this was a really interesting discussion.
Thank you for joining us, Kuro.
I just needed that. Yes, it was a pleasure. And thank you to all the listeners. It was great reading your comments. I got to see them, and we really appreciate all your thoughts. And I appreciate all the panelists. You all have some really great ideas. And thanks for everybody being such a fun addition to NAMI community. You don't know, because it does mean.
And thank you, Paul, for joining us and for running the live stream.
Yes, thank you guys for joining. And I think we should do this a little bit more often if we can.
I agree. And thank you for joining us, JP.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was a wonderful discussion, and hoping nothing but the best for all of y'all.
Ah. And thanks for joining us, Sam, too.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had such a great time on here. It's the first time I've done something like this, by the way. So I was really nervous at first, but then I was having a lot of fun like once we got started. So once again, thank you for having me on, Sketch.
Of course. Though I must yield that you kind of put the first amazing Toonami fandom collaborative together for your ranking show before.
Yes, I'm working. Well, I haven't started yet, but I'm working on combining all those into like a massive video, and I'm gonna push
Oh
that
my
out
gosh.
again. Like, I'm not doing anything new to it. All I'm just doing is taking all the pre-existing videos. The only new thing I'm doing is just I'm getting a few more tier lists that I'm just gonna throw in there, but I'm not adding to it. God no, that took so long. I'm not doing that again.
Who's ready for an 8-hour video that you can go to sleep to and wake up and it could still be playing?
13 hours actually. I counted when I finished everything. I counted the time length of each video. It totals over 13 hours. That's with edits, though.
I'm
I
not
think the
sure how
call,
that's possible.
the call, I think was like 8 hours, but the final thing was over 13.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
impressed myself.
Well, 30 seconds here and there sure adds a lot, huh?
Yep.
And thank you for joining us, Sam1.
No, thank you for having me. I always like having these group discussions because it's nice to get different perspectives from different people. And I'm glad that you came to me and asked me about this. And I was like, yeah, sure, this sounds like fun. And it was. It's been a lot of fun.
And thank you for joining us, Chug. Chug, sir, not appearing in this live stream anymore.
Wow. Okay. I think we fixed it. Yeah. Thanks, Sketch, for having me on. I appreciate the invite.
And Chug and Sequel, where can folks find the Toonami Escape Podcast?
You can just search for it on Google. Just search for Toonami Escape Podcast, and you will find our homepage there. You'll see all the episodes indexed and link there to add it to your favorite podcast player.
Do either of you want to plug your individual social medias?
I don't. I'm actually not on social media, so just check out my podcast, Chug.
I have abandoned social media as well. You can find me in the void.
And JP, do you want to tell folks where they can find you?
Yeah, they can find me at Twitter, JPBreakfast2444, on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. And I'm probably gonna leave X really soon.
Stop calling it that. We only call it Twitter.
My bad.
It is the Toonami fan community's stance that we only call it Twitter. I deem it so. I deem it so. Sam and Sam, what are your social medias?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Sam or at SZ Universe.
Mm-hmm.
And you can check me out on the Toonami Squad Sessions podcast, and I also have some other fun things I'm working on.
Cool.
You can find me on Twitter. I will always call it Twitter at Samster299. I have a Blue Sky. I rarely use it. I need to use it more often, but I have a Blue Sky. Also at Samster299. And you can check out my YouTube channel where I mainly do Toonami archiving since like 2022. But I slowly, very slowly, occasionally like to do the original video, which I did with the tier list, and I also did with the Lord of the Rings discussion, which Sketch and Kuro on. Thank you for being on that. And yeah, I also host the Toonami Squad podcast, so you can also check out the Toonami Squad podcast. And I think that's about it.
Where can they find the Toonami Squad podcast?
Yeah. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm like half awake right now. We upload the Toonami Squad podcast on our YouTube channel, Toonami Squad podcast, but we also do have Spotify, and I want to say also iTunes. I have to I have to get with Steve on that because I know he knows more than me. And yeah, also, yeah, I think that's I think that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. Kuro, where can the folks find you?
Well, in general, all the Toonami Faithful stuff, which you will say shortly, but Blue Sky and Twitter, both the same. Happy Kuro Kitty.
Okay. And Mr. Paul Pascrillo, where can the folks find you?
Well, hopefully in my bed soon because I'm getting tired.
You
Right,
really
you
had
can
to make that joke here,
Ain't
too?
nobody
did.
looking for you in your bed here, Paul. Nobody.
But well, I hope not because I want to get some sleep.
Nobody except his cat.
Yeah, you don't understand like how many times she's come up to me and almost interrupted the stream. So you can find me on Twitter at Paul Pascrillo. I'm also on Blue Sky, Paul Pascrillo as well. So you can find me on those two places. Hoping to use Blue Sky more because Twitter is toxic. So
Huh. You know what? I think at the beginning of this, I didn't actually introduce myself. That's kind of fun. Anyway, you know me. I'm Sketch. I'm Sketch1984 on Twitter and Sketch1984 on Blue Sky. And yeah, you can also find our podcast at Toonami Podcast on Twitter. It's on all of your podcast apps. So also soundcloud.com/Toonami Faithful Podcast. And of course, also ToonamiFaithful.com for all of our written content, which we hope to be doing more of that too.
and if you
And
look
again,
on the screen right now, you can scan the QR code and that'll take you to all that as well.
ooh, fancy. He's being fancy.
I only get fancy for you, Sketch.
Oh, why, thank you. Well, folks, I think this was a success. I'm glad you all could join us, and we hope you had a good time and had some thoughts. And if you have any thoughts, you can at least email the Toonami Faithful podcast on podcast.toonamifaithful at toonamifaithful.com. It's late. Yeah. I guess this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining us for the Toonami Fan Community Summits. We will do this again in some capacity at some point in the future. But until then, stay gold.